Chapter 611. At the gate of Lan City, a group of 6 horsemen was stopped when they arrived at the gate. The 2 leaders of the horsemen were tall aborigines who looked to be in their 40s or 50s. Behind them were 2 young men in their 20s and 2 children in their teens. All of them were dressed in animal skins. As for their mounts, there were 2 mountain-gazing birds, 3 jumping goats, and a strange beast covered in black scales. Take these. Remember, if your mount poops on the ground, you have to clean it up. Otherwise, you will receive 10 lashes from the Public Order Bureau, a guard said as he threw 6 straw bags over. Since when was there such a rule? A tall middle-aged man at the front asked doubtfully. Her Majesty gave the order, and it will be like this in the future. The guard had been answering these questions every day for the past few days and was a little impatient. However, he was still kind-hearted and pointed to a few horsemen not far away. You can learn from them and save yourself some trouble. The few of them looked in the direction pointed out and saw a few people trying to hang the straw bags on the buttocks of their mounts. This way, they wouldn't be like the fork-horned cow that would pull along the way. Secondly, they wouldn't notice it. After all, no one could keep an eye on the buttocks of their mounts all the way. Thank you for the reminder. The middle-aged man cupped his fists and smiled. Also, the guard carefully sized up the strange beast and warned, "You are not allowed to dig holes in the city." After a while, they set off again. The strange beast looked aggrieved. After running around naked for its entire life, it suddenly felt uncomfortable with a cloth bag hanging on its buttocks. "Third uncle, this is Lan City. There are so many people." The young man and woman at the back of the group looked at the pedestrians on the streets and said excitedly, "This is Lan City after all. Under the feet of Her Majesty." The middle-aged leader, who was addressed as third uncle, laughed. "The clothes they are wearing are so beautiful." The young lady's gaze quickly fell on the clothes that the pedestrians were wearing. Although they were ordinary in the eyes of many, they were extremely tempting to a young lady who had just come out of the mountains. The middle-aged leader calculated in his mind and said dotingly, "After we sell the things, we can buy half a roll of cloth." The young man and girl behind him were the most talented youngsters in the village. They had attained the earth wheel level before the age of 16 and were much more promising than their parents' generation. This time, he brought this group of young men and women not only to buy New Year's goods, but also to find 2 old friends and see if they could participate in this year's lantern-grabbing contest. After walking forward for a while, the middle-aged leader revealed a puzzled expression. Why were all the cloth stores closed now? He got off his horse and asked around. Only then did he find out that due to the war this year, the caravans were all gone, so naturally the cloth shops were closed. This made the girl feel slightly regretful. However, the children in the mountains were not so spoiled. They quickly focused their attention elsewhere. "What a fragrant smell!" the young girl said in surprise. "It smells even better than roasted rockworms." Not only did she smell it, but the others also smelled it. Just the smell alone was enough to whet their appetites. "The smell is coming from the front." Very quickly, they found a shop that was tightly surrounded by people. Standing on their horses, they could see a rack in front of the shop. A jumping lamb leg was being roasted on it. 2 skinny men, who didn't look like aboriginals, sprinkled some powder on the lamb leg every once in a while to make the aroma even more enticing. "What's this for? Didn't you say that there are no more caravans?" the middle-aged leader asked as he pulled one of the men. "It's not a caravan." The man who was being pulled by the leader looked back at him, pointed to the signboard above the shop, and asked, "Do you see the words on it?" "What's written on it?" the middle-aged leader asked with a hint of respect. Although Dayo respected martial arts, literate people were also looked up to. "What's written on it?" the man beside him asked softly. "I heard from them yesterday that it seems to be the imperial family's spice shop." The other man asked uncertainly. "The imperial family's spice shop. Her Majesty's spice shop." The man in front turned around and repeated, "What's a spice?" the middle-aged leader asked again. At the mention of this topic, the man immediately perked up and said, "Do you see the meat being roasted inside? Does the meat you roast smell so good?" The middle-aged leader answered truthfully, "That's it then. That's what spices do." When roasting meat, sprinkle some on it, and the aroma will immediately assail your nostrils. The taste will also make you want to swallow your tongue. The man seemed to be intoxicated as he spoke, as if he was reminiscing about the taste. How much is the spice? The middle-aged leader was a little tempted. I'm not sure, but it won't be cheap. The passerby looked at him and said, if you want to use it in the village, you might as well buy some salt. Then why are there so many people? The middle-aged leader felt strange. With so many people around, could it be that they were here to smell the aroma? After the lamb leg is roasted, it will be cut into thin slices and distributed to everyone. This is called tasting. Yes, tasting. So many people are waiting to taste a little, the passerby said after thinking for a while. That term wasn't easy to remember. This spice shop was naturally set up by Renbachien. Of the spices that were originally planted, 2 batches of sesame and 1 batch of cumin had already been produced. Only the pepper had just matured recently. As for the pepper and Chinese anise, it would take another 2 years to harvest them. However, when the sesame and pepper ripened naturally, Renbachien and the Empress were in Tianjing Basin. At this time, after the pepper ripened, they were taken out to be sold together. Besides the initial agreement with Tong Jinye to sell a portion to him, the rest of the spices were used for the palace, and the first spice shop was opened. Pepper and cumin weighed the same as silver. In other words, 1 tael of silver could only buy 1 tael of cumin or pepper, which was only slightly more expensive than salt. Back on Earth, spices were worth the same weight as gold, but the difference was too big. After all, they couldn't be sold abroad now. In Dayo, even the officials didn't make much money. If they were calculated according to the weight of gold like in ancient times on Earth, a large portion of these spices would have rotted in the warehouse. Initially, Renbachien gathered about 1,000 mu of farmland. Among them, 200 mu of sesame, 200 mu of pepper, and 200 mu of cumin. The rest was planted with Chinese anise and Chinese pepper. This year, they produced about 50,000 caddies of sesame, 100,000 caddies of pepper, and 40,000 caddies of cumin. This was a total of more than 100,000 taels of silver. 600 mu of farmland could produce such an amount of output, which could be said to be a windfall. It had to be said that this world was indeed a fertile land. Even without fertilizer or meticulous farming, they could still produce such an output. This was almost impossible on Earth. Half a day later, a few Aborigines tasted the roasted mutton and almost swallowed their tongues. They braced themselves to ask about the price of the cumin and Chinese pepper before leaving while drooling. The leader had a rough idea. Although the price wasn't low, it wasn't impossible to buy 1 tael of each for the people in the village to try. I'm even hungrier, a young girl said with an aggrieved look. After eating such a piece of roasted mutton, her stomach was about to revolt. Bear with it. Let's go see an old friend and ask about your situation, the middle-aged man said. The middle-aged man said as he led them through Jingyang Avenue. After asking around, they arrived in front of a mansion and knocked on the door. A moment later, they were welcomed in. You want to participate in the lantern-grabbing contest? This isn't impossible. You are indeed talented, but there are many talented youths in Lon City. I'm afraid you won't be able to stand out among them. Especially in terms of martial arts, the disciples of those big families are much stronger than what you have learned. If you want to find a way out, I have a chance. A middle-aged man in the hall chatted enthusiastically with the leader for a while. After hearing the purpose of their visit, he pondered for a while and said, "What do you mean?" The leader's eyes lit up. He didn't want this pair of youths to be buried in the village. Chapter 6:12. Black Bamboo Academy? What does that mean? The leader thought for a while and seemed to have heard of this name somewhere. Renbachien, you must have heard of this person. The middle-aged man laughed. The husband chosen by Her Majesty? The leader suddenly realized why he felt that he had heard of this person before. He finally realized where he had heard of this person before. I heard that he's a gigolo. The young girl behind the leader opened her mouth curiously. Her Majesty is like the most beautiful star in the sky to her, and she's really curious about what kind of husband Her Majesty has chosen. Zhu Hua. The leader turned around and glared at her, causing her to shrink her neck. "He's indeed a little pale," the middle-aged man agreed. "However, don't say this outside as it might cause trouble if someone hears it. Also, don't underestimate him." "Zhuzhua, tell us more. You were the smartest person in the village back then. Later, you went to the Yun Nation and are now well-informed in Lan City. We can't compare to you in terms of what you know," the middle-aged man said. Zhuzhua came out of the village more than 20 years ago. He was extremely intelligent at a young age and was even smarter than the village chief. However, his aptitude for martial arts wasn't considered good, and he was relatively thin and weak. After coming to Lan City, he didn't receive much attention and chose to travel to the Yun Nation. It was precisely because he was relatively thin and weak that he looked more like a very strong person from the Yun Nation. He had traveled in the Yun Nation for quite a long time. After returning, he took up a position in the Ministry of Works. Now, he was already the Minister Counselor of the Ministry of Works, a secondary class, 5th rank official. The middle-aged leader trusted Zhuzhua's judgment. "The village is ill-informed, and there are some things that you don't know. However, what kind of person is Her Majesty? Why would she find a good-for-nothing husband?" Zhuzhua said faintly. Everyone deeply agreed with these words. Doubting Her Majesty's judgment? What kind of person was Her Majesty? Why did these people need to doubt her judgment? Although he isn't good at martial arts and has never learned martial arts as far as I know, he has extremely high attainments in other areas. Did you see the Imperial Spice Store on your way here? Today, the Ministry of Works is still promoting pumpkins, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and other crops that yield thousands of kilograms per mu. All of them were made by him. The few of them were expressionless. They lowered their heads and counted with their fingers, trying to figure out how much a few thousand caddies of land per mu was. This number was too big for them to comprehend. After counting his fingers and toes for a long time, the middle-aged man gasped. "So many?" Seeing their reactions, Zhuzhua also smiled. "That's right. When I first found out, I was also shocked. As far as I know, the highest-yielding crops in the Yun Nation and Great Xia are far inferior to this. Just this alone is enough to make his contributions. Apart from this, there is also a salt well. You should have heard of this. Dayo also has a salt well now, and it was created by Principal Ren and his men. If we only talk about these two things, they are just great contributions to Dayo and are not worth much attention. However, there was also the communication method that allowed people to communicate from thousands of kilometers away, the method of mining iron or the method of forging steel, and the various strange mechanical weapons used in the war with Great Xia. All of these were created by him. Recently, he even pacified Tianjing Basin. Even the shaved ice, glass, and mirrors in the city were made by him. Also, a few days ago, he made a bet with the Zhang family from the Yun Nation. He won against them in dyeing, brewing, and forging. You guys don't know much about the Zhang family, but I have heard a little about them and know their capabilities. Ren Baqian was able to win all 3 of the bets, which is already extremely astonishing. The few of them listened attentively. Even though they couldn't feel it in the village, from what the person in front of them said, it seemed like Ren Baqian had done a lot of amazing things. This person can be considered a genius, Zhuzhua said at the end with a little admiration in his voice. He saw many things when he was traveling outside. Therefore, he understood Ren Baqian's value better than others and was more optimistic about him than Tong Jinya. This Black Bamboo Academy was established by him, and what is taught is what he has learned. Even though it doesn't talk about martial arts, it contains algebra and the way of nature. It's really amazing, Zhuzhua exclaimed in admiration. Just by looking at how he has done so many things and brought about so many changes in just over a year, you can see how amazing his knowledge is. Even though they can't learn martial arts there, it's still an excellent way out. Even though it's a waste of the talents of these 2 children, martial arts doesn't mean everything, especially in the future. There haven't been any changes in the 70 years since the founding of Dayo, but in the next few decades, as long as Ren Baqian is still around, there will definitely be changes in Dayo. The middle-aged leader was a little silent after listening. Zhuzhua's words moved him a little. However, with the talents of these 2 children, he was unwilling to let them give up on learning martial arts. It was such a pity for their talents. At this moment, Rinpoche was strolling around the market. Recently, there were many aboriginals coming to Lon City to purchase things. At the same time, they also brought along a large number of mountain delicacies, such as many rare herbs and fruits, as well as some other rare treasures. For example, Rinpoche found a leather bag that was the size of a fist when shrunk, but could fit a person when expanded. It was said to be the stomach of some kind of strange beast. Rinpoche tried it and it was very sturdy. At least, he couldn't tear it. One had to know that he had the strength of 1,300 kilograms, so he knew how much this bag could withstand. Such a bag only cost 30 taels of silver. Just now, he saw someone selling a type of baby monkey called Ting Ling. When it matured, it would be 30 to 40 centimeters tall and covered with short golden hair. Its movements were as fast as lightning, and it had great strength. It was probably at the man-wheel level. If it was fated, it could even reach the earth-wheel level. Furthermore, it could understand human language and was very intelligent. Most importantly, it had excellent hearing. After training, it could be used as a hunter's assistant. The price wasn't high, only 500 taels of silver. Rinpoche strolled around the market and bought a few novelty items before returning to the previous stall. He took a few gold ingots from the guard and threw them on the stall. There weren't any banknotes in Dayo. If he wanted to buy something expensive, he would have to carry a sack full of silver. Gold ingots were still more useful. This baby Ting Ling was only the size of a palm. It was covered with short brown hair and had a pair of eyes that looked like it came from a comic book. It looked extremely weird and its ears were also very large. Rinpoche took the rope that was tied to the baby from the hands of the aboriginals. The baby Ting Ling nimbly jumped onto Rinpoche's arm and looked at him eagerly. It grinned slightly and made chirping sounds. Little thing. Her Majesty might like it. Rinpoche stretched out his fingers and rubbed the head of the baby Ting Ling. Then, the baby Ting Ling jumped onto his shoulder. Let's go back to the palace. Rinpoche held the rope with one hand and allowed the little thing to squat on his shoulder. He then called for the guards beside him to return to the palace. After returning to the palace, Rinpoche first went to Pingle Park to take a look. Two relatively dexterous palace maids were making Kong Ming lanterns. There was already a pile of finished products at the side. These were the lanterns that Rinpoche was going to light up tomorrow night. 666. Rinpoche felt that this number was quite auspicious. Then he saw two black and white lumps rolling around on the ground. Rinpoche immediately felt sad. Chapter 613. The Empress leaned on the couch with a wine glass in one hand and watched as Rinpoche went in and out busily. The ting-ting cub that Rinpoche had just bought was beside her with a wine pot on its head and claws. It looked pitiful and kept looking around with its round eyes. At this moment, Rinpoche not only brought over all the pots and pans from the imperial kitchen, but also beef, mutton, 2 fish, and some fruits. The Empress didn't like to eat fish. Firstly, it didn't spit out bones. Secondly, she preferred to eat meat in big mouthfuls. However, Rinpoche loved to eat and would always make braised fish every 3 to 5 days. Nowadays, the imperial kitchen was pretty good at making it. According to Rinpoche, it could be compared to a 5-star chef. After all, the chefs in the imperial kitchen were originally talented in cooking. Their techniques and control of heat were also good. After Rinpoche's guidance, they improved extremely quickly. Rinpoche placed a chopping board on the stool, placed some beef on it, and cut it into slices. He then turned to the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, do you know how to chop the stuffing?" The Empress pointed at herself and found it funny. Chop the stuffing? Your Majesty's delicate hands can't be touched by cooking oil, but it's fun to do it occasionally. Let's eat dumplings tonight. Rinpoche wiped his hands with a piece of cloth. Or do you prefer to chop the stuffing or knead the dumplings? The Empress thought about it and actually didn't like either. However, seeing that he was in high spirits, she didn't want to dampen his spirits. She slowly walked over and took the kitchen knife from Rinpoche's hands. The hall was filled with a series of sounds of the knife chopping on the chopping board. Those sounds seemed to be connected together, and there was no gap in the Empress's knife. Rinpoche looked at it and exclaimed, "Your Majesty's knife technique is impenetrable. Even light can't shine through, let alone water." 30 seconds later, the Empress stuffed the knife into Rinpoche's hands and saw that the chopping board was full of meat stuffing. Rinpoche looked at the chopping board for a moment and couldn't help but say, "Your Majesty, this chopping board seems to be an inch thinner." "It's just a chopping board." The Empress disagreed. "That means that you have mixed the top layer of the chopping board with the sawdust and mixed it with the beef." Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Now we don't even need to add vegetables." The Empress stopped in her tracks and looked around. Then, as if she hadn't heard anything, she leaned on the couch and closed her eyes to rest. Rinpoche saw that even the Empress had learned how to play dead. It was better for him to do it himself. Sure enough, the Empress wasn't suitable for normal people. He asked someone to bring another chopping board and mince the meat again. When it was time to wrap the dumplings, he asked, "Your Majesty, do you not want to try making dumplings?" "I'm not trying. I want meat fillings." "Only meat." The Empress picked up the wine pot from the head of the cub Ting Ting, poured a cup of wine, and placed the wine pot on its head. The cub Ting Ting stood there obediently and didn't dare to move. Its expression became even more aggrieved. "I'm not a wine pot rack." "Are you sure it's edible?" Rinpoche squinted at her. "I have the final say," the Empress said as she glanced at him. After working for 4 hours, Rinpoche's whole body was covered with white flour. The Empress curled up on the couch and watched as he busied himself. She wasn't in a hurry, and the corners of her mouth curled up from time to time. She quite liked this kind of scene. After a long time, Rinpoche came up with more than 10 plates of dumplings. "Do they look different?" the Empress asked. The color of the fillings inside the dumpling skin wasn't quite the same. "This is the pure meat dumpling that Your Majesty wanted. There's no vegetables at all." Rinpoche pushed half of the dumplings in front of the Empress. There were still 6 or 7 plates left in front of Rinpoche. The two of them sat on the table facing each other. The Ting 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 was finally freed, but it didn't dare to run away. It stood obediently at the side and looked at Rinpoche with an expression that looked like it was waiting to be rescued from the abyss of suffering. 2 ounces of sorghum wine were poured into the dumplings, and the faint smell of dumplings mixed with the smell of wine. "Dayo doesn't seem to say Happy New Year?" Rinpoche asked. "Happy New Year then." Rinpoche chuckled. The Empress glanced at him and wanted to say, "Happy New Year," but didn't say it out loud. She lowered her head and ate 3 dumplings. She started to frown. Dumplings tasted good, and meat tasted good as well. However, pure meat dumplings didn't taste good. It was too greasy. She immediately pushed half of the plate in front of her over and said, "Eat it." Rinpoche smiled slyly. He had suffered this before. "What's inside? Pineapple?" The Empress ate one of Rinpoche's dumplings. Her eyes widened, and her face was full of vigor. "Yes, pineapple, green mist grass, and stone fish." Rinpoche gave his creativity a thumbs up. "This is passion fruit and barb turtle meat, and this is granny clam cloves." Rinpoche pointed at a few plates and explained to the Empress excitedly. He felt that with his craftsmanship and creativity, he would at least be able to get a place in a cooking competition. The combination of the sweetness of the fruit and the freshness of the fish and ghost meat had a strange appeal. Although the taste was a little strange, one would get used to it after eating it once. The Empress tasted every dish, silently took back her own plate, and pushed all of Rinpoche's plates back. Fortunately, there were fruits at the side. She ate 2 dumplings and 2 fruits, so she could barely eat them. After eating the dumplings with difficulty, Rinpoche dragged the Empress out to release the Kongming lanterns. There were 666 Kongming lanterns, which were half the size of a human, placed everywhere in the courtyard. "Can this fly to the sky?" The Empress was a little doubtful. These lanterns were made of bamboo strips and covered with a layer of white cloth. Apart from this, there was only a small oil lamp underneath. "Naturally. Do you have any wishes, Your Majesty? Write it on it and it will be brought to the place closest to the sky. Perhaps it will come true," Rinpoche asked as he took a stack of cloth, paper, and pen. Whatever I want to do, I can naturally do it. If I can't do it, it's useless to write it on it. You might as well send Li Fu to the sky so that he doesn't have to worry about it every day. Even if I write, the country is prosperous and the people are at peace, is fine. It's always a wish. Ren Baqin laughed. The empress thought for a while and really wrote the words, "The country is prosperous and the people are at peace," on the cloth that Ren Baqin prepared. Then, she got someone to tie it under the Kongming lanterns. Ren Baqin also wrote, "The 5 grains are abundant." The empress thought for a while and wrote, "The weather is favorable." Ren Baqin, "The fate of the nation is prosperous." Empress, "The power of the nation is strong." Ren Baqin, "The union of 100 years." The empress looked at him and thought for a long time. Finally, she wrote the words, "I miss you very much." Ren Baqin then picked up a pen and wrote, "Give birth to a son soon." Blood rushed to the empress's face. She kicked Ren Baqin's leg and flew out in a circle. After a long time, Ren Baqin limped back and ordered someone to light the Kongming lanterns. As the Kongming lanterns gradually rose into the sky, hundreds of lanterns of different heights slowly rose into the sky like a stairway to heaven. It was extremely beautiful in the night, like a beautiful painting. In the background was an endless galaxy that complemented each other. Won't it fall? The empress suddenly thought. If the oil lamps fell, it would probably cause a fire. Your Majesty, even if it falls from the sky, the oil will be blown away. Naturally, nothing will happen. The empress felt relieved and relaxed as she looked up at the beautiful scenery in the sky. As the night wind blew, the Kongming lanterns began to slowly float toward the south of the city. The lanterns in the night sky were naturally seen by countless people. Many places started to become noisy, and some people even came out of their rooms to look up at the night sky after hearing the news. Just like the fireworks last time, this time, it was also a breathtaking scene. It floated out of the palace. It must be Yague's doing. Tong Lan stood in the courtyard and pouted, but still admitted, "It's beautiful, but I don't know how he did it. I'll learn from him later." "What a clever idea," Tong Jinye said from the courtyard. In House Yunyan, many girls leaned against the window and looked at the sky outside enviously. Many of them thought how good it would be if they were the lanterns and could fly freely. In an inn, "Zhuohua, come out and take a look." A young man kicked open Zhuohua's door. "Bear cub, don't you know how to knock?" Zhuohua scolded. "So pretentious," the young man said in disdain. He then grabbed Zhuohua's hand and ran into the courtyard, pointing to the sky and saying, "Look! So beautiful!" Zhuohua looked at the scene in the sky and her eyes immediately sparkled. "I heard that there were fireworks during Her Majesty's birthday celebration. It's a pity that I didn't get to see it," the young man said with some regret. In Jing Street, Li Fu reclined on the roof and looked at the scene in the sky. He left the wine glass on the roof and disappeared in a flash. After a while, he appeared in the sky and grabbed a Kongming lantern at the bottom. After seeing the structure, he revealed a contemplative look. In the Qin residence, Qin Chuan said loudly, "Bring me my bow. I want to see what it is." "Father, it flew out of the palace." A young man who looked similar to Qin Chuan reminded him. Qin Chuan looked at the Kongming lantern in the sky and was very curious. After thinking about it, at most, he would be kicked by Her Majesty, so he said boldly, "It's okay, just bring me the bow." Not long after, Qin Chuan pulled the bow and arrow. With a sound of the bowstring, a lantern was instantly extinguished, and the Kongming lantern also fell. "Sir, I picked it up. There are words on it." After a while, 2 servants rushed back with the Kongming lantern. "What's written?" "The 2 of us are illiterate." The 2 guards looked aggrieved. "Useless." Qin Chuan took the cloth and saw the words, "Have a son soon," written on it. Qin Chuan's expression immediately became interesting. This thing that flew out of the palace had these words on it. He didn't dare to think about it. "Father, what's written?" The young man from before came over to take a look and couldn't react for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know anything." Qin Chuan immediately scolded, "Nonsense, I just found out." After thinking about it, It was better not to let others know about this. Otherwise, Her Majesty would fly into a rage out of humiliation. The next day, in the Shi residence, Shi Qing was surprised. What? Have a son soon? Her Majesty and Rinpochen. Sir Qin, is this true? Why would I lie to you? Qin Chuan's face was immediately filled with, You actually suspect me? Why do you suspect me? When have I ever lied? Chapter 614. 2 days later, when they went to court again, everyone's faces were full of spirit. Everyone exchanged glances. Have you heard? You heard it too. Is it true? It shouldn't be false. Who would dare to talk about this? Besides, it was Mr. Qin who said it. Everyone turned to look at Qin Chuan again. What are you looking at? Qin Chuan's face darkened when everyone looked at him. He cursed in his heart. How did the news spread so fast? He mustn't let His Majesty know that he was the one who spread the news. Tong Jinye of the Ministry of Works. You have an opinion? Ministry of Revenue Tu Wan sneered. Lord Qin. The Minister of Justice squinted at him and asked, What do you want to say? The Minister of Rights raised his head and pointed his nose at Qin Chuan. The other officials glanced at Qin Chuan, then raised their heads to look at the sky. Although Qin Chuan was the Minister of War and was highly skilled, everyone present was a cardinal heaven expert. If they were to really fight, other than the Empress, Hongwu, and Shiwanya, the rest of them might not necessarily be afraid of anyone. Qin Chuan cursed in his heart. This sentence was like poking a hornet's nest. If he continued to speak, he would probably be surrounded and kicked. He turned his head away from the crowd. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Ha! A sneer reached his ears. He didn't need to turn his head to know that it was Tong Jinye, that old man. After the Empress arrived, everyone looked at her strangely from time to time. What happened? The Empress asked coldly. She felt that the atmosphere in the imperial court today was a little strange. I'm fine. The country is prosperous and the people are at peace. Everything is great, Shi Qing said. No one has anything to report? The Empress asked again. No. Then why are you all looking at me? Everyone lowered their heads to look for ants on the ground. Raise your heads. The Empress said coldly. What exactly happened? Or can't you tell me? Your Majesty, it's really nothing, everyone said. What could possibly happen? For the past 2 days, rumors had been flying everywhere. Everyone was gossiping. However, could he tell the Empress about the contents of the gossip? What should he say about this? Since there's nothing else, all of you may leave, the Empress said. Your Majesty, Zhikohai spoke. The moment this junior elder, who had been well behaved for the past year, spoke, everyone turned to look at him. Qin Chuan's heart was in his throat. Junior elder, please speak. Seeing that Zhikohai had spoken, the Empress's expression softened a little. I feel that since Principal Ren and Her Majesty haven't gotten married yet, it isn't appropriate for you to stay in the palace. Why don't you grant Principal Ren a temporary residence? Zhikohai suggested. What's wrong with it? The Empress asked. It's inappropriate. Zhikohai lowered his head. Where's the gift? The Aboriginals have never had such etiquette. Could it be that you are using the etiquette of Great Xia to request me? The Empress said coldly. Zhikohai broke out in a cold sweat when he heard this. I wouldn't dare. It was true that the Aboriginals did not forbid living together before marriage. However, Her Majesty was the current emperor, so it was easy for others to gossip about her. Seeing the Empress's attitude, everyone swallowed their words. Who are you to question my private affairs? If there's nothing else, all of you can leave, the Empress said impatiently. After everyone left, the Empress returned to her quarters and called Exenja over. Go and investigate. During the court session today, I saw that they were behaving strangely. Are they hiding something from me? The Empress said. Yes. Exenja immediately accepted the order and left. For hours later, Exenja returned again. After listening to her story, the Empress's face immediately turned black. No wonder everyone was behaving strangely today. No wonder Zhikohai said those words. Damn that Qin Chuan. Immediately, she appeared in the sky above the Ministry of War in a few flashes. Her cold voice that was filled with anger reverberated throughout half of Lan City like a clap of thunder. "Qin Chuan, you ignorant old man, come out now." When Qin Chuan came out, the Empress didn't say a word and slapped him with her palm. The air rippled as if a huge transparent palm print had appeared. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, Qin Chuan broke into a run and asked, "Your Majesty, what did I do wrong? How dare you run?" The Empress was furious. She nailed Qin Chuan into the ground with one palm strike, pulled him out by his scalp, and kicked him, collapsing 6 or 7 buildings in a row. "Someone, tie him up," the Empress said angrily. "Your Majesty, what did Sir Qin do wrong?" The officer from the Ministry of War quickly asked. "Spreading rumors." The Empress's face was unsightly. When everyone heard this, they gave Qin Chuan a look of condolence. "You've been exposed." "Your Majesty, how do you want to punish Sir Qin?" Tong Jinye rushed over from the Ministry of Works and asked softly. The Empress said hatefully, "Hang him on the palace gate." If the punishment was too heavy, Tong Jinye might have stopped her. However, after hearing this punishment, he immediately went to take pleasure in Qin Chuan's misfortune and personally tied him up. While tying him up, he said, "Sir Qin, this mouth of yours serves you right. You even dare to talk about Her Majesty's private affairs. You are too daring. Who asked you to watch your mouth? Hang him on the city gate for 3 to 5 days, 10 to 15 days, and wake up." Qin Chuan glared at Tong Jinye with a bloody nose and swollen face. The Empress's face turned black again. Just now, she said that Qin Chuan spread rumors, but when it came to Tong Jinye, it became his private affairs. Those who didn't know better would think that what Qin Chuan said was true, and she flew into a rage out of humiliation. After kicking Qin Chuan to the wall, the Empress said fiercely, "Someone hang Qin Chuan on the palace gate. No one is allowed to let him down unless I say so." After finishing her sentence, she stomped her feet and disappeared. She still felt angry when she returned to the palace. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be in a good mood after being criticized for no reason. Furthermore, Qin Chuan was a blabbermouth that spread everywhere. Not long after, Rinpochian returned to the palace after school. He saw Qin Chuan hanging on the city gate with Tong Jinye and a few people from the Ministry of Works watching. He immediately laughed and asked, "How did Sir Qin anger Her Majesty this time?" Tong Jinye looked at Rinpochian strangely and said, "Sir Qin's behavior has something to do with Sir Ren." Rinpochian immediately felt strange and asked, "What does it have to do with me?" Tong Jinye smiled ambiguously and said, "Sir Qin spread the matter between you and Her Majesty everywhere, which angered Her Majesty. After all, it's between you and Her Majesty. Do you think it has anything to do with you?" Rinpochian felt even more strange. The matter between him and Her Majesty had been spread for a year. What else could it be? Tong Jinye immediately made a gesture. "Have a son soon." Rinpochian heard this and laughed mischievously. Soon after, he realized that something was amiss. How did Qin Chuan know? What did he spread to the outside world? After thinking it through, Rinpochian immediately spat and said, "Serves him right." Tong Jinye deeply agreed with him. Rinpochian didn't even look at Qin Chuan and entered the palace. When he returned and saw the Empress, he acted as if he didn't know anything. This was to prevent the Empress from venting her anger on him. When the Empress saw that Rinpochian acted as if nothing had happened, she became even angrier, but it couldn't be seen on her face. After lunch, the Empress said, "I will give you an hour to rest. Today's training will be doubled." Rinpochian was dumbfounded and asked, "Your Majesty?" Chapter 6:15. A few days after the New Year, a group of hundreds of carriages and horses arrived at Lan City under the escort of soldiers. From afar, they saw Zhang Junjing and a few others waiting at the city gate. This group of people were mostly burly men, ranging in age from 17 to 70 years old. All of them looked tired. Although they had arrived at their destination, they didn't look excited. Instead, they felt uneasy. "Second uncle, it must have been hard on you for the long journey." Zhang Junjing brought Zhang Hiqi and Zhang Heju to greet them. A white-haired, Exhausted old man came down from the carriage. This group of people were the craftsmen of the Zhang family. Many of them were well-known figures in the manufacturing industry. After Zhang Junjing lost the bet, they received the letter and discussed it before heading to Lan City. After traveling through many places, they finally arrived after a month. The old man didn't answer. He first looked up at Lan City, which was close at hand, and then said, "Let's talk after entering the city." He turned to a burly man riding on a fork-horned cow and said, "Thank you for escorting us all the way. Someone bring the things here." As he spoke, someone brought over a plate of silver ingots. "Thank you for your hard work these days. This is a small token of my appreciation. Please have a drink." The old man smiled. The burly man looked at the plate of silver ingots and waved his hand to let someone take it. "It was the Protector General who ordered us to escort you. Otherwise, I'm afraid you wouldn't have reached Lan City." After saying that, he ignored the group of people and left with them. After a while, Zhang Junjing brought everyone to a house that had been prepared beforehand. Then, the old man brought 6 or 7 people to sit with Zhang Junjing in a house. "I have already read the letter. Tell me more in detail," the old man said. Then, Zhang Junjing explained the details of the bet. After that, he carefully took out a heavy box from the cabinet and placed it on the table. After opening it, there were torsion springs of various sizes inside. "Second uncle, this is what he made." A few people beside the old man couldn't help but take out the torsion springs and examine them carefully. The old man observed for a long time before sighing. "Amazing! I didn't expect someone to do this better than thousands of craftsmen of the Zhang family. Since we have lost the bet, we have to be willing to accept the loss. The Zhang family will work for this person. However, this matter involves the safety of thousands of our Zhang family members. In your opinion, what do you think of this person?" Zhang Junjing pondered for a moment before he slowly said, "Although he looks ordinary, there's a universe in his stomach. Your evaluation is not low. This person looks ordinary and doesn't stand out at all. However, his methods were indeed very vicious." Putting everything else aside, just the title of Poison Warrior alone was exchanged for countless lives. Furthermore, they were also very proficient in manufacturing machinery. Last year, when Great Xia attacked, if it weren't for those extremely powerful machinery, Great Xia wouldn't have been defeated so quickly. With the addition of the Yun nation, the situation might have been completely reversed. Uncle already knows about forging, dyeing, and brewing. He even founded Black Bamboo Academy to impart algebra and other knowledge. I already know that. He is indeed an extraordinary person. The old man nodded. You know what this old man wants to know. The lives of so many people in the Zhang family are all on him. He can't be careless. There's something second uncle doesn't know. Last year, he made a trip to Tianjing Basin and returned with thousands of immigrants from the Han Nation. The Imperial Glass Shop and Spice Shop that he runs have these immigrants working there. In addition, there are also a few in the Imperial Beast Garden and the Palace. I once inquired with those Han Nation immigrants, but the information I obtained was very limited. From his actions, it seems that he wants these Han Nation immigrants to live together with the Aboriginals. It seems that he prefers to use people who aren't Aboriginals. After all, he isn't an Aboriginal, the old man said. As for his temperament, he doesn't seem like a cold-blooded person. However, the most important thing is whether our Zhang family is valuable or not. Second uncle still needs to see for himself, Zhang Junjing said. We have to meet him since he is here. Make the arrangements, the old man said. In fact, Rinpochian already knew of their arrival before they entered the city. He received the visiting card the next day and met them in a tea house. In addition to Zhang Junjing, his second uncle, Zhang Zishan, and several old craftsmen from the Zhang family were there. Seeing that Rinpochian was so young, even though everyone already knew about him, they still had doubts in their hearts. How could someone so old learn so many things? Principal Ren, I'm Zhang Zishan. This is the first time we've met, and we're here to discuss the Zhang family's matters. Zhang Zishan stood up to welcome Rinpochian. Rinpochian nodded and sat opposite everyone. I'm a boorish man who doesn't know much and can't speak. I just want to know how Principal Ren intends to settle the Zhang family. What can you give us? Zhang Zishan went straight to the point and placed himself in a lower position. Ren Baqian laughed, looked at them, and said, "Isn't it too late for you to ask about a bet and a loss?" After Ren Baqian finished speaking, their faces immediately changed. Zhang Zishan's expression changed and he said, "Principal Ren, you misunderstood. The Zhang family isn't bargaining, but we want to know how we will be settled. After all, this concerns the lives of thousands of people in the Zhang family. There are many opinions in the Zhang family, and we just hope that Principal Ren can make it clear so that we have some ideas." "Senior, you're not a boorish man." Ren Baqian laughed. "Dayo lacks everything, including talent and ordinary skills. You will naturally have a place to use your skills here. Whatever the Zhang family knows, you have to bring over and develop this industry. However, Dayo isn't the Yun Nation, and I can't bring over the Yun Nation's methods. It's impossible to control all aspects because the best things are in my head. The specific method is that there must be a certain number of aboriginals participating in every industry, and both sides will contribute money and effort. The aboriginals will need to account for 70 to 90% of the industry. It doesn't seem like much, but if it goes any higher, I'm afraid that people will be jealous. Furthermore, this is an entire nation, and only our two sides are doing it. What does this represent? This is a monopoly of a certain industry in a country. Of course, this will slowly be liberalized in the future, but that's a matter for the future. If we do this, I'm afraid that the Zhang family will be swallowed alive in a few years," Zhang Zishan said in a deep voice. The others didn't look too good either. According to Ren Baqian, it was equivalent to the Zhang family handing over all their skills and owning a small portion of each industry. After a few years, when these industries developed in Dayo and the aboriginals thoroughly grasped them, the Zhang family would really have nothing to do with it. I said before that the best things are in my head and not in your hands. Don't think too highly of yourself, Ren Baqian said unhurriedly. In fact, he understood the Zhang family's concerns, but his words weren't forgiving at all. Chapter 616. Weaving? Water conservancy? Planting? Processing? Even if it's farming equipment, what do you have to show me? Ren Baqian thought for a while and said to Sherhu, "Go to my room and bring me the brown wooden box under my bed." Sherhu then left in a hurry. After that, the room fell into silence. Ren Baqian calmly waited there. It would be a waste of his breath to speak now, and these people wouldn't shed tears until they saw their coffins. The Zhang family was pondering what Ren Baqian had asked the guard to bring. An hour later, Sherhu hurried back with a wooden box that was 2 feet long, 1 foot wide, and half a foot thick. "Sir, I have brought it." Ren Baqian took the box and opened it. He rummaged through it and threw out a blueprint. A water-powered textile machine that uses water to spin cloth. Take a look and see if you can understand it. This is a water-powered forging machine that is also driven by water. It can save a lot of manpower when used for forging. This is a pulley composite bow. A strong bow with 100 kilograms of force can be drawn with 20 kilograms of force. I don't need to explain its function. As soon as Ren Baqian finished speaking, the person who was still studying the blueprint immediately snatched the composite bow blueprint from his hand. After looking at it for a while, everyone started to be surprised. So that's how it is. Using pulleys here can reduce the force. In fact, this world had already discovered the function of pulleys. This simple physics was something that everyone knew in any world, but the problem was understanding it. See, I'm not afraid of you seeing these things, and I'm not even afraid of you studying them, because I know far more than you think. What you think is only important in your eyes. These few things that I have brought out are already more advanced than what you know, but these are only simple and easy to make. In fact, I can make better ones, but it will take some effort. I use you not because of the things you can bring over, but because you can save me time. I have too many things to do and don't have the energy to focus on everything. Therefore, I need some smarter people to help me with some things. You are the smarter people in my eyes, Ren Baqian said slowly. After a long time, Zhang Zishan put down the blueprints and looked at Ren Baqian with a serious expression. In addition to the winemaking, springs, and dyeing, Rinpoche had indeed shown that he was stronger than the Zhang family in many aspects. One had to admit that there were indeed people in this world who were born with knowledge. When he was at this age, he was already somewhat famous in the Zhang family, but he was still only talented in one aspect. A sense of powerlessness welled up in his heart. There was really no comparison between people. Compared to him, he could be said to have lived his life like a dog for the past few decades. Sir Ren, you are indeed amazing. You are stronger than thousands of people in our Zhang family. But you still haven't told me how to make me believe that you won't burn the bridge after crossing it. What's in it for me to burn the bridge after crossing it? Rinpoche laughed. I don't care about your technology. I don't care about money. If it weren't for the war, just by selling those mirrors to the Yun Nation and Great Xia, I would be able to earn a lot of money. Rinpoche casually took out a palm-sized object and placed it on the table. There were 2 glass funnels at the top and bottom, and the sand on one side was constantly flowing down to the other side. This is an hourglass. It can be used to measure time. It takes exactly 2 hours for the sand to flow from one side to the other. How much do you think this thing is worth? 600 taels of silver. Zhang Zishan and the rest carefully stared at the transparent hourglass that Rinpoche took out and guessed. Although this hourglass looked a little crude to Rinpoche, to the Zhang family, it was already extremely exquisite. They believed that such a small object would definitely have a lot of rich people willing to spend a few hundred taels of silver to buy it. There are people willing to buy it for 1,000 taels of silver. I'm taking this to show you that any small object I take out has great commercial value. If I want money, I can get it at my fingertips. You guys can help me save some time. What's in it for me to kill you guys? I can even tolerate the Jing tribe, so why can't I tolerate you guys? As long as you know your place, naturally, no one will touch you. I can also recommend you guys to the Ministry of Works. You should know about the Jing tribe, right? Rinpoche looked at Zhang Junjing. What I want is for the Jing tribe and the Aboriginals to live under the same sky. Therefore, I will gradually raise the status of the Jing tribe, and you guys can receive the same treatment as the Jing tribe. Sir Ren is from the Jing tribe? Zhang Zishan asked. In your eyes, I'm just a family. Don't use your thoughts to guess what I'm thinking. Rinpoche shook his head. His words were full of condescension. I'm looking at the future of this world. The Zhang family indeed didn't know what Rinpoche was thinking, but his tone made them feel as if he was standing in the clouds and looking down at them. He was simply an arrogant lunatic. Did he think he was a god? Your Zhang family has already sent over the name list, yet you're asking about this now. You don't dare to advance or retreat, and you're in a dilemma. This isn't the demeanor of a family that has been passed down for hundreds of years, Rinpoche said with a smile. Zhang Zishan didn't look good even though what Rinpoche said was true. However, he really couldn't do anything about it. After all, the lives of the thousands of people in the Zhang family were at stake, and he had to be careful. Even now, the Zhang family was still quarreling incessantly. I'll give you another promise. The Zhang family can choose one industry or technology as its core and establish itself. Rinpoche smiled. Sure enough, as soon as he said this, everyone in the Zhang family showed a trace of joy. Rinpoche sighed in his heart. The thinking of the people in this era was limited, and no matter what family it was inevitable. They didn't think about the industry they chose. If they mastered more advanced technology, the entire Zhang family could collapse at any time. In fact, the Zhang family might have understood this, but they still chose to do so. They needed to hold on to something tightly, as if this would make them feel that their lives were in their hands. Sir Ren, there's no need for this, Zhang Junjing suddenly said. Everyone in the Zhang family immediately turned their heads and glared at him, looking puzzled. Junjing, since when can you make decisions for the Zhang family? Zhang Zishan shouted. Second uncle, I'll tell you later. Zhang Junjing shook his head slightly and cupped his hands toward Rinpoche. Sir Ren, this time, we're petty. The Zhang family is willing to believe in your sincerity. With your status, you naturally wouldn't lie to us. I only hope that you'll be generous with your teachings in the future. Rinpoche smiled. There was finally someone in the Zhang family who understood. The Zhang family can look for me after you've thought it through. Seeing that the others were still puzzled, Renbaqian got up and left with his guards. After Renbaqian left, the Zhang family had a dispute in the restaurant. In the end, Zhang Junzheng still managed to convince everyone. The next day, he found Renbaqian, and the Zhang family completely submitted to him. Of course, they were nominally under the empress. Since then, Renbaqian had a large number of skilled craftsmen under him. The first thing Renbaqian did after the Zhang family submitted to him was to mobilize some Baihu from Tianjing Basin and head to the Yun nation with his subordinates. With the power that the Zhang family had developed in the Yun nation for hundreds of years as spies, these Baihu could easily infiltrate the major cities of the Yun nation. Chapter 617. The Zhang family had pledged allegiance to Renbaqian, and everyone wanted to learn something from him. After all, Renbaqian had proven that he could completely crush the Zhang family in many aspects of technology. Those things that the Zhang family had were nothing in his eyes. Even though the Zhang family had such intentions, the blueprint that Renbaqian gave them still gave them a fright. They didn't have the time to ponder whether it was a good or bad thing to tie the lives of thousands of Zhang family members to Renbaqian. This is the blueprint of the clock tower. There are 3 hands of different lengths on the clock dial, which are the hour hand, minute hand, and second hand. This clock dial divides the day into 24 hours, and each hour is divided into 2.5 hours. When the minute hand moves 1 round, the hour hand will move 1.5 hours. 2 rounds will be 2 hours. When the second hand moves 1 round, the minute hand will move 1 small space. It seems to have the same function as a sundial. More than a dozen people from the Zhang family gathered in a circle and looked at the blueprint in the middle. This world mainly used a sundial to measure time. It was a piece of equipment that used the shadow of the sun to measure time. However, sundial was affected by day and night, as well as the change of seasons. Therefore, its accuracy wasn't high. It's completely driven by machinery and is much more accurate than a sundial. The error is within 5 minutes every day. In theory, it can achieve an even smaller error, Renbaqian said faintly as he sat in his school office with his feet on the table. The most important thing is that this clock tower isn't limited by time and can be seen regardless of day or night. Moreover, it's simple and clear. It's perfect for measuring time, Renbaqian said. If that's the case, it's much more convenient than a sundial. However, the structure is 100 or even 1,000 times more complicated. How is this made? What's the use of this mechanism? Why is there a lock here? Soon, everyone couldn't be bothered with Renbaqian anymore as they discussed in low voices. It's written here as an escape mechanism. As the name suggests, it's an escape mechanism. We have to see how it is made. Never heard of it. What's the one below? Most of the people from the Zhang family who came this time were craftsmen, and they were very enthusiastic about this new thing. This is the most important structure of the clock tower. We already have all the blueprints, so it shouldn't be difficult for us to deduce what we don't understand. I hope you can figure it out as soon as possible. This clock tower is more than 60 meters tall and will become a landmark in Lan City. Everyone who comes to Lan City will see this clock tower as soon as they see it. The name of the Zhang family will also be known and remembered by everyone. After hearing what Renbaqian said, they were even more enthusiastic. Not many people can resist the temptation of leaving their names in history. You have to study it and shrink it to the size of a human head or even smaller, Renbaqian continued. We will try our best. Zhang Junjing cupped his fists. I always thought that your Zhang clan had the best craftsmen. As long as someone can do it, we can definitely do it too. Zhang Zishan said decisively. I like your confidence. If you need any manpower or materials, just let me know. I just hope to see the goods as soon as possible. Renbaqian laughed. Zhang Zishan's words made him a little fond of the Zhang family. Sir Ren, please find a quiet residence for us. Hundreds of people can't even sleep well in that courtyard, Zhang Zishan immediately said. I have neglected this matter. I will get someone to arrange it for you in a while. Let's stay at Jing Street, which is adjacent to the Jing tribe. You will be more comfortable there, Rinpoche said after some thought. Thank you. The Zhang family didn't have any objections to living in Jing Street. After all, they were surrounded by Jing tribe people who looked the same. Compared to the fierce-looking aboriginals, it was much better. Moreover, it wouldn't be easy for others to find trouble with them. After the Zhang family left, Rinpoche returned to the palace to see the empress. As soon as he opened his mouth to greet her, she stretched out her finger and shot a grape-sized fruit into his throat. This time, the purplish-green fruit is very sweet, the empress said with satisfaction. Cough cough, cough cough, cough 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 cough. Rinpoche felt like he was suffocating. That grape was directly stuck in his windpipe. Seeing that his situation wasn't good, the empress flashed and slapped his back. The grape was spat out again, hit the ground, and bounced up to hit Qing Yuan in the eye. Ouch! Qing Yuan was also shocked. Cough cough, Your Majesty, this purplish-green fruit of yours is indeed not something that ordinary people can enjoy. Rinpoche's face turned red. When he finally calmed down, he looked at the fruit on the plate held by Lisan's cub, golden retriever, and felt guilty. He had almost choked to death by such an inconspicuous fruit just now. A few days ago, the empress gave Lisan's cub a few names. They were Dove, Ferrero, and Erguot. Rinpoche also gave it a name, Jingeng, and finally made a compromise with golden retriever, Ungrateful. The empress snorted softly and floated back to the couch, ignoring him. Rinpoche stood in place and touched his neck before stepping forward and saying, Your Majesty, I have just given the clock tower blueprint to the Zhang family. When the time comes, we will be able to build a lighthouse in the center of Lan City that everyone can see when they look up. The empress had always been interested in such topics. She quickly forgot that she almost tortured Rinpoche to death with a fruit and began to excitedly discuss where to build the lighthouse. The empress's idea was to build it in the square in front of the palace, but Rinpoche felt that it wasn't appropriate. The lighthouse in the plan was about 60 meters tall, and it could be said to have a panoramic view of the palace from there. It wasn't suitable to be too close to the palace. The empress thought about it and felt that what Rinpoche said made sense. The two of them took out the blueprint of Lan City and compared it for the whole afternoon. At first, they planned to tear down a small area near Jingyang Street and make a turntable square with the lighthouse in the middle. At the same time, they would make that place the center of Lan City. In the end, they considered that whether it was mobilizing the winged cavalry or activities like the Great Hunt, they would set off in front of the palace. Such a turntable square would affect the roads, so they finally changed it to a location between Beihong District and Julian District. After deciding on the location, Rinpoche began to think about the feasibility of speculating on the land nearby. As an earthling, he subconsciously felt that the value of the land would definitely rise. However, after thinking about it carefully, he gave up on this idea. Most of his actions were on behalf of the empress, and it wasn't a good thing for the imperial family to compete with the commoners in this aspect. Furthermore, Rinpoche and the empress had a more ambitious idea. After conquering the Yun nation, they would build a modern new city next to Lan City. It would be a new city that was more complete in terms of drainage, pipes, electric wires, layout, public facilities, and toilets. Even though Lan City was the imperial capital, there were too many disadvantages in this era. Just the fact that people could urinate and defecate anywhere was enough to give people a headache. From Great Elder Shi Qing to the peddlers and pawns, no one cared about this matter. Even though they had recently begun to control this aspect, especially the matter of the mounts excreting in the city, it was still difficult to stop. On one hand, no one cared about it, so it was naturally difficult to implement. On the other hand, especially in Lan City, there wasn't even a single public toilet on a few streets. How could people suffocate to death? Therefore, the value of the Yun nation was great. The Yun nation contained too much of Rinpoche and the empress's expectations. Chapter 6:18. Qing Lian sat lazily on the branch and opened the letter in her hand. A line of words came into her eyes. Do you want fame, wealth, and status? Do you want to know the mysteries of this world? If you want, I can give them to you. Go and find them. I've put everything there. How arrogant. Qing Lian snorted coldly, then continued to read the entire content. She gently swung the branch, carefully folded the letter into a paper airplane, and threw it into the distance. A person jumped up from under the tree and caught the paper airplane in his hand. Your habit of throwing things around is not good. How about it? What do you think? You're either an egomaniac or a big liar. Qing Lian said disdainfully. I know you've suffered a little, but don't let this blind you. Su Qing said with a smile under the tree. Hearing this, Qing Lian's face immediately turned livid. At that time, she just wanted to watch a good show, but she didn't expect that kind of encounter. If she could do it all over again, she would choose to leave the imperial capital far away and never stay for a moment. Qing Lian shouted softly, and a green light descended from the sky. Then, like a flying immortal, it stabbed towards Su Qing from head to toe. You can't blame me for this. Forget it, I won't mention it in the future. Su Qing quickly dodged, only to see that there was a bottomless hole where he was originally. If you mention it again, don't blame me for opening a hole above and below for you. Qing Lian sneered. Su Qing's face was serious. I always feel that you seem to have said something extraordinary. Get lost. But you'd better not underestimate him. This person is not simple, and I can't figure him out. Su Qing changed the topic again. He said those words at Qi Zixiao's birthday celebration. It's been almost 3 months now, and he suddenly showed it to me. What exactly is his intention? Aren't you interested? Su Qing raised the letter in his hand with a surprised look. Qing Lian obviously liked to join in on the fun. It was said that there was a treasure map left behind by a master. She chased after it for 2 years and fought several bloody battles before she finally snatched the underwear left behind by that master. 1,200 pieces, do you think I'm a fool? Only a fool would look for it. It's impossible to gather them all, Qing Lian said disdainfully. Su Qing coughed awkwardly. You sent someone to look for him? Qing Lian re-examined Su Qing. She didn't realize that he was so stupid before. You don't have to gather 1,200 pieces to find the address. What do you want me to do? You look like you're constipated, Qing Lian said with a frown. I want you to go to Lan City and look for someone. Su Qing finally said something. Qing Lian asked. Ning Kaichen is a sword master just like you. The spiritual sword in his hand is called Green Pearl, and his strength is equivalent to the Earth Embryo realm. Ning Kaichen and is a Qing and is Ning. Some of the things in his hands are things that we must obtain. Su Qing took out a portrait from his bosom. It was a portrait of a delicate and pretty scholar. In addition, tell Dayo that the new emperor has already ascended to the throne and has recruited 400,000 new soldiers to fill the various regions. Also, transfer the veteran soldiers from the various cities to the border. At the same time, tell Dayo that the new emperor has ascended to the throne and recruited 400,000 new soldiers. Together with the remaining 180,000 soldiers in Tiesua Pass, we have another 500,000 soldiers. This is also the final strength of Great Xia. This will be the last glory of Great Xia. Su Qing looked at the sky. In other words, your plan is about to begin? Qing Lian asked with interest. It's faster than I expected. Qing Lian stretched. Her white clothes clung to her body and outlined her beautiful curves. It's also faster than I expected. Fortunately, I was sent to Tianjing Basin this time and happened to be in contact with Renbaqian. That's why Emperor Xia died so early and why we can progress so quickly, Su Qing said. Renbaqian. Qing Lian's eyes flickered. Don't get any ideas and ruin the big plan. Qi Zixiao isn't someone to be trifled with. Even Teng Yu died in her hands, Su Qing warned. Qi Zixiao wasn't Teng Yu's match. Teng Yu was too arrogant, Qing Lian said. Although she didn't see the situation at that time, she could guess what happened. Teng Yu is cunning and unscrupulous. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be easy to deal with, but he didn't cause much damage to the Aboriginals before his death. She naturally didn't expect that Teng Yu didn't even know where his spear went before his death. Otherwise, it might have caused some trouble. I'll pack up and set off tomorrow, Qinglian said. She turned around, and an inexplicable glint appeared in her eyes again. Renbaqian. It was better to offend a villain than a woman. As soon as Renbaqian came out of Jing Street, he heard a delicate voice from the roadside. Sir Ren, do you want to come over? This voice gave Renbaqian the impression that it was saying, Sir, come and play. In particular, that delicate voice was full of charm and charm. Most people wouldn't be indifferent to it. Renbaqian turned his head and saw a seductive woman leaning against the door of a shop and smiling at him. The woman was dressed in purple. Her hair was tied up at the back, and the hair on the sides and side of her face was loose, covering half of her face. The area around her eyes was painted pink, making her look long and charming. Her red lips were like a raging fire that could burn into one's heart. Ning Kaichen. Renbaqian looked at her. He hadn't seen her for 2 months, and she had become even more enchanting. He looked at the sign of the shop that Ning Kaichen was leaning against. There were 2 words on it, home, and a big wine beside it. Ning Kaichen opened this wine shop after living in seclusion in Jing Street for 2 months. With her strength, those who could beat her wouldn't care about her. Ordinary people couldn't beat her, so there wouldn't be any trouble. Coupled with her enchanting appearance, most people wouldn't find trouble with her. Not only that, but her wine shop's business was also good. It was said that many children of officials often visited her recently. For example, Shi Wanya's son. For example, Du Chongke. The thoughts of these people were self-evident. However, he didn't know what these people would think if they knew his true identity. With these thoughts in mind, Renbaqian got down from his mount and strode in with his guards. It's rare for Sir Ren to visit me, so I might want to stay for a while. Sir Ren, please wait for a moment. I'll go and cook 2 side dishes. Ning Saichen's voice was soft and charming, and her eyes were almost dripping water. Shi Hu and the others who were behind Renbaqian clearly knew his identity, but they still couldn't help but feel thirsty. Going after knowing the man. Should I go after him or not? The scales in their hearts swayed up and down as they stared fixedly at Ning Kaichen. Cough, just sit for a while. There's no need to trouble yourself. Renbaqian's cough finally woke everyone up. If he didn't wake them up, Shi Hu was afraid that he would be drooling. Even after being woken up by Renbaqian, their hearts were still swaying. Finally, they turned their heads to the side with a look of regret. If it was a woman, they would snatch her back even if their legs were broken. Unfortunately, it was a man. Even so, they still wanted to go after knowing the man. You seem to be in good condition. Renbaqian looked around and said. The wine shop wasn't big, and there were 6 tables downstairs. There were flowers everywhere, and it was obvious that they were changed every day. I'm alone and drifting like duckweed. What can I do even if I look fresh? Ning Kaichen said faintly. Renbaqian didn't dare to answer and pretended not to hear her. If Sir Ren has nothing to do, you might as well come and visit me. After all, we are old friends and can talk to me, Ning Kaichen said. I'm busy. Renbaqian shook his head and said, I'm so busy every day that I haven't had any free time in a long time. If Sir Ren has any troubles, you might as well tell me. I might be able to help, Ning Kaichen said softly. At this moment, she slowed down her voice, which was soft and gentle, as if it was brushing against the tip of one's heart. Renbaqian thought to himself that she was formidable. If one didn't know her roots, he was afraid that not many people would be able to resist her. After Ning Saichen's temperament changed, she was even more of a woman than a woman. After sitting in Ning Saichen's wine shop for 30 minutes, Renbaqian left with his men. After coming out, Shi Hu couldn't help but smack his lips and say, Oh my, this guy. I want to tie him up and bring him back to get married. Renbaqian turned his head and looked at Shi Hu with disgust. With a face full of resentment, he said, I didn't expect you to be like this, Shi Hu. Stay away from me. He is much more seductive than the women in the village. Shi Hu thought about it and felt conflicted. Chapter 619. The new year had just passed, and a few major events that were very important to the people of Lan City happened before and after the Lantern Festival. First, There were hundreds of 6-meter-tall elephants that headed north from Tianjing Basin and arrived at the south gate of Lan City. After confiscating the 6 doors' secret manuals, Shi Huanye used a few months to finally subdue this batch of elephant soldiers. Hundreds of behemoths that were 6 meters tall, 11 meters long, and weighed 12 to 13 tons walked on the road. They were like small moving buildings, giving people the feeling that they had returned to the ancient times, when countless wild beasts ran amok. The aboriginals that they encountered along the way had no choice but to avoid the elephant soldiers. No matter what stood in their way, it would eventually be flattened and trampled into mud. As they moved forward, even the ground was shaking. The tremors could be felt from dozens of kilometers away. Many people even thought that an earth dragon had turned over, but later discovered that it was actually a group of behemoths. Many people in Lan City tried to find out what was going on. Finally, news came from the city gate, and many people immediately ran out of the city to watch. After receiving the news, the Empress brought the court officials out of the city to watch. In fact, she had received the news the night before, and there was even a conversation at that time. "Your Majesty, those elephant soldiers will arrive in Lan City tomorrow." After receiving the news, Renbaqian returned to the palace in high spirits and reported to the Empress. "Oh," the Empress responded and understood. "Those are hundreds of elephant soldiers, which are like tanks on the battlefield. Protector General, she spent a lot of effort to subdue them, and they will be very useful in the war with the Yun nation. Your Majesty, can you at least give us a reaction?" Renbaqian was speechless when he saw the Empress's reaction. "Oh," the Empress responded. After a while, she looked up and said, "Those things? What else do you want me to do?" Her eyes were full of doubt. It was as if they weren't elephant soldiers but a group of pigs. "They are just a group of pigs. What else do you want me to do?" At that time, Renbaqian only had this thought in his mind. "Your Majesty, although in your eyes, these elephant soldiers aren't very strong and your Majesty alone can clean them up in a short period of time, even the winged cavalry can kill them all in a short period of time. However, on the battlefield of the Yun nation, these elephant soldiers could be used to charge and break through enemy lines or to attack cities and plunder land. These giant elephants had extremely tough skin, huge bodies, and strength. They were extremely lethal to ordinary soldiers and were a great deterrent. It was very difficult for ordinary people to remain indifferent to such behemoths. As such, this was an opportunity to show the people of Lan City how powerful our army was. It was also to let them have a strong confidence in the war ahead and that they would definitely win. Just like on Earth, many countries would expose some of their weapons to the people every once in a while to increase the confidence and pride of the people in the country and to deter the enemy. We don't need deterrence right now. We just need to raise the citizens' confidence, like, wow, we actually have such a powerful weapon. Therefore, your Majesty has to show your face and let the people feel that this is something that your Majesty values," Renbaqian said to the Empress. The last few sentences were said in an extremely exaggerated tone. "Have you found anyone who has doubts about the outcome of the war?" the Empress asked. "No," Renbaqian answered truthfully. It had been less than a year since the war started. Although the lives of the people had already been affected, no one had any doubts about the outcome of the war. In fact, no one even had any doubts about this war. Therefore, it's fine as long as I'm here. As long as I'm in this position and the people see me, they won't have any worries. I just need to let them know that I'm here, and that's enough." The Empress's voice wasn't loud, but her words were filled with strong confidence and dominance. Renbaqian couldn't help but praise her in his heart. Sure enough, the Empress should be like this. This was why he said that this was how an Empress should be. "Well, Your Majesty, you are right. However, I still hope that Your Majesty will show your face and bring everyone to see these rare giant elephants. At least, most people haven't seen them before, right? Even if it's just a rare sight, it's still a chance for the people of Lan City to cheer." Renbaqian still hoped that the Empress would show her face outside the city tomorrow. It wasn't a petty thought, but he always felt that if the Empress didn't show her face, it would seem as if those giant elephants weren't important. How could he endure this? One had to know that he had always been very concerned about these giant elephants. The Empress finally nodded her head. As a result, the scene of the Empress leading the court officials out of the city to see the giant elephants took place. When everyone left the city, there were people cheering on both sides of the road and in the shops. This was the influence of the Empress in Dayo. Was it because the Empress was the fourth or fifth most powerful person in the world? It made no difference to everyone. Everyone knew that the Empress was the most powerful person in Dayo. When they arrived at the city gate, they saw a group of huge creatures standing in the distance. Their bodies were covered with rattan armor that was soaked in a special plant juice, and they revealed tusks that were 2 to 3 meters long. Even though they were far away, they could still feel their enormous size and the intimidating aura of the herd of over 100 giant elephants. So it's a giant elephant. It's rare to see such a large herd. In the past, I only saw a herd of a dozen or so in the south. Although their individual strength isn't considered strong, they can't be underestimated when they charge, Shi Qing said as he recalled what he had seen and heard when he saw the elephant soldiers behind the Empress. This is called a giant elephant? I have never seen it before. Tong Jinye said. He would only address himself as I in front of Shi Qing and the Empress instead of I. The Empress always kicked him around like a ball. He treated Shi Qing this way because of the respect he had for elders and wise men. After so many years, he had already gotten used to it. Everyone stopped outside the gate. Renbaqian held the walkie-talkie and ordered, "Advance!" Following which, the herd of elephants in the distance let out a series of deep and resounding moos. Subsequently, over 100 giant elephants began to advance, and the ground began to shake. Under the command of the soldiers behind the elephants, the speed of the elephants began to increase, and the ground rumbled incessantly. One by one, the elephants raised their trunks and let out a roar. The herd of elephants charged wildly toward the city gate with the posture of crushing everything in their way. That kind of attitude, that kind of stance, made many people feel a bit surprised. When these huge monsters charged, it was really amazing. Many ordinary Aboriginal commoners near the city gate felt a trace of fear in their hearts when faced with such a landslide and tsunami-like scene. This made them very dissatisfied. Many of them clenched their fists, straightened their necks, and gritted their teeth as they stared at the charging herd of elephants. They didn't let out a cry of alarm or take half a step back. All of them thought to themselves that if they took half a step back today, cried out in alarm, or revealed even the slightest bit of timidity, they would lose face. Damn it, do I still want to be shameless? And in front of Her Majesty. Moreover, the Aboriginals have been hunting for a living since ancient times. We can't be afraid of seeing a few of these fellows in our generation. Otherwise, we won't have the face to return to the 60,000 mountains. Such barbaric beasts aroused the blood and fighting spirit in their blood. It was as if they had returned to the era when their ancestors fought with the various beasts in the 60,000 mountains. For a moment, except for the sound of the elephants running and mooing, all the pointing and gossiping at the city gate had disappeared. Instead, it was somewhat quiet. Renbaqian looked back in surprise and saw the commoners clenching their fists with blue veins popping out on their necks and staring ahead with red eyes. He was surprised at first, then relieved, and finally felt a little happy. After all, he was satisfied that the huge weapon that he valued could intimidate these commoners. However, wasn't the reaction of these commoners a little too extreme? Why did they look like they were going to eat someone up? Why did they look so fierce? This thing isn't bad. It can be used in war. If there's nothing to eat at the front line, we can still eat meat. With such a big body, it should be able to feed a lot of people. Qin Chuan suddenly burst into laughter. Following Qin Chuan's laughter, the people from the Ministry of War laughed as well. Tong Jinye, Shi Qing, and Tu Wan laughed as well. Following which, the fierce expressions of the commoners also relaxed, and they all laughed out loud. Do you understand? The Empress tilted her head and looked at Renbaqian. I don't understand, Renbaqian answered truthfully. He was a little confused and didn't know what was going on. This is blood, qi, and courage. To you, these elephants are weapons of war, but to others, they're just food. It's not because of who is a cardinal heaven expert, but because this has been the case since ancient times. As the Empress spoke, she was in high spirits and looked heroic. She was obviously very satisfied with the performance of the people behind her and the commoners. Rinpoche looked at the Empress and then at the people behind him before chuckling. Chapter 620. After persuading the Empress to go out of the city to view a batch of elephant soldiers, Rinpoche was taught a lesson. This made him realize that the people of this world were different from those on Earth, and that they reacted differently when encountering things. Subsequently, these elephant soldiers were sent to the Yun nation to test how much power they could exert on the battlefield. After the elephant soldiers left, it was time for the lantern-grabbing contest. Previously, Rinpoche was coerced by the Empress into participating in the contest. Then, he shook his head and won a bunch of shoes. This time, he accompanied the Empress and watched from the sidelines. The two of them were whispering to each other throughout the contest, and it was quite a public display of affection. 2 days after the lantern-grabbing contest, there was another very important matter. The troops that were transporting the spoils of war and captives from the Yun nation finally arrived. There were close to 100,000 captives, 300 carriages filled with gold, silver, jade, and gemstones, and nearly 1,000 ox carts filled with salt. Originally, there were slightly more than 100,000 captives, but thousands of them died during the month-long journey because they wanted to escape, were beheaded in public, or were injured, and died due to other reasons. In the end, only 96,400 captives arrived. The number reported was a round number of 96,400. In reality, it could be a little more than that. As they couldn't place too much hope on the statistical ability of the Aboriginal militia, who were originally made up of ordinary people, the militia who were transporting the goods had easily omitted the numbers after the 1,000 digits. As for the missing dozens of captives at this level, they didn't have much of a concept in their minds. This procession, which was made up of the militia, spoils of war, and captives, stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The ox carts that were transporting the spoils of war arrived outside Lon City at noon, and the end of the procession would only arrive at noon on the third day. Naturally, it was impossible to send all 100,000 captives into Lon City for the Empress, the officials, and the commoners to view. Logically speaking, a group of captives with the highest status should be selected and paraded through the streets of the city. This was the so-called prisoner offering. For example, the warlords of the dozens of cities that had been breached and the military generals that had been captured. Unfortunately, Zedonglai did not have such a thought in his mind. He had a great time killing. Almost all the castellans and officials in dozens of cities were killed by him. The squires who wanted to resist were also killed. The obedient squires and some low-level officials were left in the original city to maintain order. In the end, after picking and choosing from this batch of captives, the ones with the highest status were actually only a few lieutenants of the city lord's army and a sect leader of a small sect. There were also a few wealthy merchants who were sent into the city as captives, and they really couldn't be considered anything special. When the burly and energetic militia escorted hundreds of carriages filled with spoils of war into the city, the entire Lon City was in an uproar. Both sides of Jingyang Street were filled with people who had heard the news. Even the shops on both sides of the street and the open windows on the second floor were filled with people. When they saw the queue, they immediately cheered. The militiamen looked at the crowds on both sides and heard the cheers from both sides, and they all looked excited. Seeing this scene, they felt that it was all worth it. Furthermore, they also understood that they were receiving cheers that should have belonged to the soldiers of the Protectorate of the Northeast. The ox cart at the front was pulling stacked boxes. The heavy ox cart squeaked as it moved along the stone road. Even if the boxes weren't opened, the onlookers could imagine what was in the boxes. Images of the boxes filled with gold, silver, and other valuables popped up in their minds. The reality was just as they thought. More than 100 carriages at the front were filled with gold and silver. Excluding the boxes, each carriage carried 600 kilograms of gold and silver. The 100 carriages contained 60,000 kilograms of gold and silver. Most of it was silver and a small amount of it was gold. The total value was equivalent to millions of taels of silver. However, There were also some jewels and ornaments that were worth more than twice as much. Behind these 100 carriages were 200 carriages filled with gold and silver utensils, calligraphy, paintings, and other valuable-looking objects. When the cloth covering the carriages was removed, the dazzling gold underneath was revealed. Many items were piled up in a messy manner, giving off a feeling that they were of great value. It took 2 hours for the 200 carriages to pass through the crowd. During this time, the cheers were even louder than before. After passing through the crowd, there were more than 10 haggard-looking captives with their hands tied up and their clothes in rags. All of them lowered their heads and dragged their weak bodies as they staggered forward. Compared to the tall, strong, and fierce-looking Aboriginal commoners that crowded both sides of the road, they were like shivering quails. Who are they? At this moment, the commoners stopped cheering. All of them stared at this group of captives and asked around. They seem to be captives. Beat them to death. Someone immediately shouted. Beat them to death, Mias. They are to be presented to Her Majesty. Are you going to present them to Her Majesty after they are beaten to death? Someone at the side scolded angrily. Oh, that's fine too, that person immediately replied excitedly. It was worth it to be able to take this opportunity to see Her Majesty. It's impossible to present them to Her Majesty. Not in this lifetime. Instead, they will be brought back and given 30 lashes. Don't worry, we will be very gentle. The public order officer, who was standing at the side, immediately said sinisterly. At the thought of the public order officer's barbed whips, everyone immediately shriveled up. The Aboriginals were valiant, and there weren't many commoners in Lawn City who hadn't been whipped before. Many of them had been sent to the palace twice, thrice, or even more. 3 lashes from that kind of whip would cause one to be bedridden for several days. After 30 lashes, one would lose his life. At this moment, Rinpoche was wearing an official's robe and standing above the imperial city gate with the empress and the others. The square in front of the palace below was filled with carriages arriving one after another. Greetings, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is mighty. The militia below immediately cheered when they saw the empress appear at the top of the city wall. These people couldn't think of anything like, Your Majesty is skilled in both literature and martial arts, and will benefit the common people for thousands of years. You will rule the world for thousands of years. In the end, they could only shout, Your Majesty is mighty. However, the atmosphere was extremely enthusiastic. These militias came from other cities, and 99% of them had never seen the Empress before. At this moment, they were all excited to see her. This trip was really worth it. Well done, the Empress said faintly from the top of the city wall. Her voice was flat, but her voice spread throughout the city. Thank you, Your Majesty. These plain words made these people feel as if they had received the greatest reward. Present. Following a shout, everyone opened the boxes on the carriages, and the carriages immediately reflected the dazzling gold and silver light. Tu Wan and the other people from the Ministry of Revenue were elated. 300 carriages of gold and silver were worth at least a few million taels of silver. This batch of gold and silver would be replenished to the national treasury, and the financial situation would finally be a little better. Tong Jingye, Qin Chuan, and the others also looked happy as they touched the slips of paper in their arms. The slips of paper were filled with the areas that their departments needed to spend money on. Chapter 621. After looking at the spoils of war, the Empress ordered them to be sent to the Ministry of Revenue for inventory. She then ordered the dozen captive representatives to be brought to the palace hall. A moment later, more than a dozen shabbily dressed captives were brought into the palace hall while trembling under the gaze of a group of Cardinal Heaven experts. They weren't asked to kneel as Dayo didn't have this habit. They just stood there and let everyone watch them. However, this kind of watching was close to torture for them. Thinking about a dozen rabbits being watched by dozens of lions with sesame, cumin, salt, pots, bowls, ladles, and barbecue grills, this was probably how they felt at that time. The Empress sat on the throne and tapped her chin with one hand, feeling bored. She wasn't interested in such captives. What do you do in the Yun nation? the Empress asked after a while. Then there was silence. Are all of you mute? How dare you not answer Her Majesty's question? You must be tired of living. Lien Liang widened his eyes and emitted a bone-chilling murderous aura. Spare us! Spare us, Your Majesty! The dozen captives immediately became paralyzed. They had suffered a lot along the way and were already exhausted. They were even more terrified when they were brought to the center of the palace hall. Now that they were frightened by Lien Liang, they immediately became paralyzed. Some of them immediately wet their pants, causing everyone to frown. Forget it. Take them away. The Empress waved her hands in boredom and ordered people to take them away. This was considered a formality for the captives to be sacrificed. These habits of Great Xia are really boring, the Empress said after the captives were taken away. This practice of sacrificing captives was naturally learned from Great Xia. This was the Empress's first time experiencing it, and she was very disappointed to see a few shabbily dressed ants trembling in front of her. It was very boring and uninteresting. Your Majesty, these captives are indeed of no value. If we capture the Emperor and Prime Minister of the Yun nation next time, we can bring them here so that you can ask them what they think, Rinpochen said after a few people were taken away. Oh, that makes sense. The Empress nodded. If the high-ranking officials of the Yun nation were to be sacrificed, she could meet them. That's right. There's really no need for these people to be sacrificed. I don't know which bastard arranged for these people to be shameful to Your Majesty. I'm afraid he's not very smart, Tong Zhenye said disdainfully. Qin Chuan glared at him furiously. The others were all looking forward to watching a good show. In any case, the two of them had been fighting for so many years that everyone was already used to it. That's all for now. All of you may leave, the Empress said faintly. Your Majesty, I have one more thing to say. Seeing that the Empress had spoken, Tong Zhenye hurriedly stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, currently, Mount Damo produces close to 200,000 kilograms of iron every month. However, due to the insufficient transportation capacity, a large amount of iron ore has been piled up on Mount Damo. At the same time, the smelting furnace and forging workshop at 19 Rivers also needed to be expanded. Also, the salt wells didn't have enough manpower and needed to be expanded. In addition, there are areas that need to be repaired in the city walls and government offices. As he spoke, Tong Zhenye took out a stack of paper with densely packed words written on it. Immediately, a guard took it and placed it on the desk in front of the Empress. Your Majesty, the front line's rations are still 2 months short. Furthermore, the continuous battles over the past few months have greatly damaged their weapons. Many of the soldiers' weapons have already been used as iron plates. Also, the salary and rations of these auxiliary soldiers have not been decided yet. Even if we don't mention the monthly salary, His Majesty should still reward the auxiliary soldiers. Qin Chuan said. At this time, the two of them were surprisingly in sync. Your Majesty, the Ministry of Revenue only allocated 50% of last year's salary and is still short by half. If we don't distribute it, I'm afraid that many officials won't be able to eat meat. Xiong Yaoha, the Minister of Rights, followed closely behind. It was a classic case of not eating meat. However, there was nothing wrong with it. Your Majesty, currently, the Public Order Bureau, Zhu Yan, the Minister of Justice, immediately followed up with the Minister of Rights. The hall suddenly became like a market. A group of people stood below and shouted. Between the lines, there were only 3 words. Want money, want goods, want people. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Last year, many of the cities in the north suffered losses, and the allocation of money and rations consumed more than half of the national treasury. After that, many of the cities in the northeast were attacked by the Yun nation, and we also need to allocate food to help the people there tide over the difficulties. If all the money is transferred, it will only barely be enough to help the people in the destroyed cities survive until the spring harvest. We absolutely won't have any extra resources for other purposes. Tu-Wan stepped forward with an ashen face, and her voice immediately overwhelmed everyone. In fact, they still owed the rearguard commandery a few months' worth of rations. The Empress couldn't send hungry soldiers. However, Seeing two wands surging aura and knocking everyone aside, Rinpoche was very rational and didn't say anything. His physique wasn't like that of Tong Jinye and the others. It didn't matter if they were hit, but if he was hit, he would be half dead. Well, the Baihu of the rearguard commandery were all rich people, so they shouldn't be short of rations and wouldn't starve to death for the time being. It was better to bring this matter up with the Empress later. All of you shut up. The Empress's face turned blue, and her hair began to flutter. Her aura was like a towering mountain, suppressing everyone. All of you step down. We will discuss this after an inventory. The Empress said coldly. Your Majesty. Tong Jinye was unwilling to give up and wanted to say something. Step down. A bright red, square brick smashed into Tong Jinye's head, and it was immediately smashed into pieces. The feel of this thing was excellent, and the Empress had always been very accurate when throwing it. Unfortunately, the significance of this brick was far greater than its lethality. To Tong Jinye, it was no different from a piece of tofu smashing into his head. The lethality was probably less than a piece of tofu smashing into an ordinary person's head. He just wanted to tell everyone that the Empress was in a bad mood and didn't want to talk to them. They were to quickly get lost, or else she would flip out. Seeing that the Empress was on the verge of losing her temper, everyone had no choice but to temporarily stop talking and step down. Rinpoche was the last to leave, half a step behind the Empress. Your Majesty, it's not worth getting angry over this matter. Rinpoche softly comforted the Empress from behind. Why should I be angry? The Empress, who was angry just now, turned her head and looked calm. It has been like this for so many years, and I am already used to it. The Empress looked at him and said, I just find them noisy. Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that the Empress could also put on an act. In any case, they will quarrel when they don't have money, and they will quarrel even when they have a little bit of money. I think that after we conquer the Yun nation and have money, they will stop quarreling, the Empress said. At that time, they will quarrel about other things, Rinpoche said after thinking about it. When they are hungry, they think about filling their stomachs. After filling their stomachs, they want to wear warm clothes. When they are full and warm, they will think about other things. The ancients said it well. One thinks about sex when one is full. The Empress kicked Rinpoche's calf, and he felt like he heard the sound of bones cracking. What do you think about sex when you are warm? The Empress looked at him coldly and asked. That's what the ancients said, not me. Rinpoche hugged his legs and jumped around in circles. Kick him if you want. He was innocent. The Empress snorted. Actually, this is fake. Everything in the world is just a facade. It's fake and not real. If I feel pain, then it will be painful. If I see through this illusion, then I won't feel pain. Amitabha. Rinpoche took a long time before putting his leg down. He tried his best to maintain a calm expression and act like an enlightened monk. These days, he had made great progress in his study of Buddhist scriptures. At this moment, he felt that learning Buddhism was really good. Sometimes it was very useful. It was just like calming one's heart and cooling down naturally. The Empress kicked his other leg, following which she softened her tone and asked gently, Does it hurt? Rinpoche's face twitched. Chapter 622. 3 days later, Rinpoche brought his men out of the city and went to the captive camps to take a look. The situation made him frown. It was filthy, chaotic, and lifeless. Nearly 100,000 people were held in 3 captive camps. There were more than 30,000 people in each camp, and they were sleeping directly on the ground. Rinpoche didn't know where Tong Jinye's previous arrangements went. Other than a fence around the 3 captive camps, there was nothing else. Everyone in the captive camps was dirty, and their faces couldn't be seen clearly. It was as if they had rolled out of the mud, and it was unknown how long it had been since they last bathed. They probably hadn't bathed since they were captured. Occasionally they would raise their faces, but their eyes were still full of fear. Is this how you arrange these people? Rinpoche furrowed his eyebrows. He saw that everyone was curled up in a pile here and there, and it was a complete mess. The most outrageous thing was that he actually saw two women among the crowd. It was easy to imagine how terrible it would be to have two women and a bunch of men huddled together. There was also defecation everywhere. From the moment he entered the camp, he had been smelling the lingering stench, which mixed with the rancid smell of the captives, almost making him faint. A large number of fly-like insects flew around the camp, annoying people. However, many of the captives couldn't be bothered to drive the insects away even if they landed on their bodies. "Sir, what's the problem?" Accompanying Rinpochen was a captain and a few captains. They were all transferred from the protectorate of the center to be the backbone of this auxiliary army. They were surprised to hear Rinpochen's words. They looked at these people and felt that they were very honest. Those who stirred up trouble had all been killed. "Do you know what these people are used for?" Rinpochen asked. "I don't know, sir," the captain answered honestly. "We need them to repair roads, bridges, cities, and mines. There are many things for them to do. If we want them to do these things, we first have to keep them alive and well. Only living people can do things. We didn't ask you to painstakingly escort them here from the Yun Nation so that their corpses can be buried in the soil to become fertilizer after they die." "Oh, I really thought they were going to be buried. It said that the crops grow especially well when the corpses are buried." The commandant had a simple and honest look on his face. Last year, hundreds of thousands of corpses were buried in the north. After that, the crops in the north grew extremely well. "If they are dead, should I drag you to mine and build roads?" Rinpochen really wanted to get someone to dig a hole and bury him. "Sir, what should we do?" The captain scratched his head and looked at Li. Although it was a little dirty, it was still quite stable. "These people wouldn't die if they were given food. Let's continue watching first," Rinpochen said with a straight face. He continued to walk around the captive camp and discovered more problems. Many of them were injured and moaning on the ground. However, there was no one to take care of them and no doctor to treat them. Many of their wounds were rotten and smelly. Those who were still alive were considered lucky. It was estimated that many of the people who had died along the way were injured like this. Moreover, many of the injuries on these people's bodies were caused by the journey. He didn't even need to ask to know how it was caused. During this period of time, he saw them eating once. The food was unexpectedly good. It was meat soup filled with fragrant fatty meat and vegetables. When it was time to eat, it was chaos again. Pushing, trampling, and even brawling could be seen. The militiamen didn't seem to be surprised. They only went in with sticks and smashed the heads of more than a dozen people at the height of the disturbance. They even broke the limbs of 2 people to make the captives behave. They didn't care about anything else. After roughly walking around the 3 captive camps, Rinpochen first ordered everyone to take a bath and set up some public toilets. He then frowned and returned to the palace before starting to write at a great speed. The situation in the captive camps had to be improved. These people couldn't be left lying on the ground. They also needed to build simple residences and improve their living conditions. Otherwise, not to mention the dew every morning and evening, a heavy rain would cause many of them to fall ill. If the weak ones didn't receive timely treatment, their lives would be very short. Then, some ordinary doctors and apprentices would be assigned to them so that they wouldn't die from minor illnesses that could be cured with a few herbs. The most important thing was the various systems. The systems for these captive camps had to be set up first. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. With rules, there would be order. With order, these captives would be able to survive. The first rule was the formation of the captives. These captives were to be organized into 10 large groups with 10,000 people in each group. Each large group was divided into 10 middle groups with 1,000 people in each group. Further down were the small groups with 100 people in each group. Further down were the small groups with 10 people in each group. At the same time, a captive would be selected to be the team leader to manage the group. The Aboriginal militiamen would be the team leader, and the captives with high prestige would be the deputy team leader to assist in the management. In the future, all the actions of these captives would be done in small groups, regardless of whether it was work or living quarters. At the same time, men and women weren't allowed to mix in the small groups. Even if they were from the same family, they had to be separated. The most important thing was to implement the punishment system. If one person in the small group ran away, the whole small group would be punished. If one group ran away, the whole small group would be punished. At the same time, if someone in the small group caused trouble, everyone in the small group would be punished. If there was any negligence in the work of the small group, the entire small group would be punished. Following which, Rinpoche wrote down dozens of rules, including everything that he had seen and everything that he could think of. This included everything from going to work in the morning, eating, finishing, sleeping, hygiene, daily behavior, and everything else. With these systems in place, the captive camps should be able to look more presentable. If there were any problems in the future, he could just add more to the list. However, there was an extremely important rule that he noted on another piece of paper. As a modern person, he wasn't used to using some people as slaves forever. He also understood that people needed a certain amount of hope to survive. He also understood the significance of a little hope for these captives. They would struggle to grasp the light in the darkness that was the size of a firefly. Rinpoche needed to give them hope, and they would continue to move toward that little bit of hope and grasp it tightly. The hope he gave them was very simple, which was to give them freedom after a certain number of years. As long as they could live until then, they would be able to live like normal people in this world and reunite with their families. For this goal, these people would work hard to survive. At the same time, it would reduce a lot of uncertainties. Otherwise, if there was no hope at all, these people would either be thinking about how to escape or be like the Walking Dead. One could imagine the efficiency of this kind of work. The efficiency of doing something with hope and living day by day was completely different. Even though building a road wasn't a very meticulous project, it wasn't easy to do either. In particular, many places had to cross mountains and rivers. If there were any problems during this period and there was no hope, these people definitely wouldn't say anything because it had nothing to do with them. However, if they had a little subjective initiative and a certain reward and punishment system, they would take the initiative to point out the problems. Chapter 624. Rinpoche sat in the garden for a long time with a pensive look on his face. It was as if he was recalling his lost youth and running under the sunset. Are you in a bad mood because you didn't disturb them? It was rare for the Empress to show concern for him. Her voice was soft and gentle. If it was any other time, Rinpoche would definitely take advantage of her and climb as high as he could. However, he was preoccupied with other matters at this moment, so he didn't pay too much attention to it. It's not that I'm in a bad mood. Rinpoche sorted out his emotions, sat up straight, and said, in fact, what they said was right in some aspects. Just let those people work and give them their freedom. There's no need to pay them. Oh, the Empress replied plainly. She continued to look at him as if she wanted to see through his inner thoughts. Did he give up so quickly? If that was the case, she would be disappointed. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, he had to persevere on his own path and see the moment it blossomed and bore fruit. As for whether the fruit was bitter or sweet, he would only know when the time came. It was just like how she chose Rinpoche as her husband. Even without the subsequent incidents, she wouldn't easily go back on her word. According to the words of Earth, even if they had to kneel, they had to walk the path they had chosen. However, they left out one thing. Rinpoche raised his voice. After working for 8 years, many of them have become experts in the construction and road repair industries. In the next few decades, Dayo would need a lot of craftsmen. Especially for cement buildings, it was difficult to find such a group of skilled craftsmen in a short period of time. It would be a pity to let these people go just like that. If he didn't give them hope, then they would definitely not put their minds on it. They would lack subjective initiative and might even become walking corpses. Furthermore, we can't do this forever. After all, after swallowing up the Yun Nation, it will become a part of Dayo. The people of the Yun Nation will also be Her Majesty's people. Blindly using force was not a good choice. Ruling such a large piece of land and ruling over so many nations, His Majesty would be more suitable to be a virtuous ruler than a tyrant. If they followed the previous discussion and could become commoners after 8 years, they would definitely not stay. Even if they had nowhere else to go, they would still choose to return to their hometown. The captive camp had become one of the worst memories of their lives. The reason why I want to pay them wages is because I want to use them as craftsmen and not as captives who are exploited blindly. Let them not feel too much resentment and be grateful for His Majesty's kindness. Also, let them treat this as a way to make a living. Even if they are free at that time, with a change of heart, some of them will still stay. Even some of those who leave will return to this line of work when they have nowhere else to go. They will not feel too much resentment in their hearts. Oh! The Empress nodded thoughtfully. At the same time, there's one more thing. Dayo doesn't just need 100,000 captives. They might need hundreds of thousands or even millions of captives. With so many people, if they all returned home and returned to society, it would have a certain impact on the Yun nation that had just calmed down. One had to know that these people were people who had nothing. When the time came, there would definitely be people who would take risks out of desperation. This would not be beneficial to the rule. So, by keeping these people here, we can save a lot of manpower, and we can also divide the crowd and reduce the impact. Oh! The Empress nodded thoughtfully. She hadn't considered some of the things that Rinpoche mentioned. After all, it was easy for them to plunder a region, but they had no experience in ruling a region full of foreigners. Perhaps it couldn't be said that they had no experience at all. Their only experience was to drive all the remnant citizens of the Han nation into Tianjin Basin, guard the only exit, and let them fend for themselves. When the time comes, it won't be easy to make these people stay without using force. Rinpoche sighed. The Empress continued to nod her head thoughtfully. Although it was the easiest to do things with a knife to one's neck, it wasn't the most effective. I'll go back in a while and find a loudspeaker. Shall we compete in a louder voice? Rinpoche snorted. I can make you doubt your life. The voices of the people in the imperial court weren't soft. One person's voice could be as loud as the horn of a large truck. This was considered an innate skill of the Aboriginals. Rinpoche estimated that Tong Jingye's voice could reach at least 100 decibels. However, it didn't matter. I'll get a loudspeaker that's 130 decibels, which is equivalent to the sound of an airplane taking off. It will be enough to make you doubt your life. The Empress looked at Rinpoche's face full of fighting spirit. After thinking about it, she decided not to tell him that the one with the biggest fist was the boss. She would tell them that the one with the biggest fist was the boss. In the afternoon, Rinpoche hurried back to Earth. The business license has been completed, the company has been established, and the address has been chosen. It's all here. In addition, you suddenly threw so many things at me. Do you want a pay raise? Shen Feng threw a stack of documents on the table in front of Rinpoche. She sat there and watched Rinpoche read the documents. She carefully observed his face and temperament and found that he was becoming more and more ferocious. He looked a little like those guys whose brains were all muscles. In Rinpoche's hand was the plan to set up a martial arts center. 1 month in Dayo time and 3 months on Earth time. This plan was already on the fast track and had already begun to be implemented. Rinpoche had high expectations for this plan. In his opinion, it was much more important than the pharmaceutical factory. In fact, there was no comparison at all. Although martial arts had declined, the cultivation method would be announced sooner or later. At that time, the world would undergo tremendous changes, and the value of high-level martial artists would reach its peak. One had to know that cultivation was the direction of human evolution and could prolong one's lifespan. To the rich, it was far more valuable than external objects. When the cultivation method was announced, the entire world's perception would suddenly change. At that time, every high-level martial artist would become a fragrant cake fought over by the rich. Even if they were to be used as personal trainers, they would still be of great value. Needless to say, when many high-level martial artists appeared in the world, it would be very difficult for ordinary people to face off against them with firearms. At that time, for their own safety, the rich would also need to recruit high-level martial artists. Furthermore, the cultivation of high-level martial artists was extremely long and couldn't be cultivated overnight. Furthermore, it wasn't something that could be easily cultivated by ordinary forces. If 1/3 or even half of the high-level martial artists came from their own martial arts centers, the value of this network alone would be immeasurable, not to mention the reputation and potential strength of the martial arts centers. Chapter 625. He could even order them around like the rearguard commandery and use points to exchange for secret manuals. In order to obtain points, they had to complete missions. The secret manuals were the bait dangling in front of everyone, and they would find a way to swallow them no matter what. After mastering power, everyone wanted to go one step further and obtain more power. By mastering such a force, he would be able to become one of the top forces. Although he wouldn't be able to master weapons, these high-level martial artists were weapons themselves, and this was enough to attract attention. As for this, Rinpoche believed that it wouldn't take too long. After all, paper couldn't wrap fire, and this matter would be discovered sooner or later. On one hand, the country would sooner or later increase the number of people practicing, and this kind of thing couldn't be hidden forever. Otherwise, it would lose its meaning of existence. It was most likely to be a small number of troops, such as the special forces. As long as there were a lot of people, it would be easy for the news to leak. On the other hand, the experts trained by the country couldn't always hide in the base. Once people had power, they wouldn't be willing to be mediocre. Think about it, if you had power that far exceeded ordinary people, would you be willing to hide? What if something happened to your family? What if your family is being bullied by others? As long as they did something, it would be easy for others to find out. Most importantly, after the establishment of the Martial Arts Center, as the strength of the martial artists trained by the Martial Arts Center increased, the country was forced to speed up the release of this matter. Therefore, no matter how he thought about it, this matter couldn't be hidden for long. Rinpoche originally guessed that it would take at most 10 years to 15 years. Coupled with his own martial arts center, this speed would be even faster. It was likely to take 6 to 10 years. What could the pharmaceutical factory provide him in 15 years? Even if the annual profit was a few hundred million or even a billion, it wouldn't be more than 10 billion in 15 years. It might seem like a lot, but 10 billion in 15 years would only be equivalent to a billion now. Although such a person was also rich, it couldn't be compared to what the Martial Arts Center could bring him. The Martial Arts Center not only brought him money, but it also brought him strength and a large network that spanned the entire world. Therefore, Rinpoche had high expectations for this martial arts center. He had already seen that the future world would inevitably change, so he had to grasp as much strength as possible before that happened. Only then would he be able to leap to the top of the world and watch everything happen when the time came. His time on Earth was limited. He only had 10 days a month on Earth. He didn't have the time or energy to invest in technology or other industries. Besides, he didn't know how to do it even if he wanted to. The 100 million plus dividends from the pharmaceutical factory and the tens of millions he had originally received would only amount to a little more than 200 million. It was an astronomical figure for ordinary people, but it was not enough to cause any waves in this world. On the contrary, everything that the martial arts club needed was his strong suit. So many experts and secret manuals were his greatest resources. Moreover, he was rushing to catch up with the tide of the upcoming great change. He would be a fool not to make good use of this. Rinpoche looked through the things that Shen Feng handed over, made some arrangements, and dismissed her. He then gave Renwanyan a call. "Brother, it's been so many years. You finally remembered that you have a younger brother." Renwanyan was surprised when he received the call. It was the first time he had received a call from his brother, who had become more and more elusive since a few years ago. Not to mention himself, even his parents had always complained that the fledglings had grown up. In the past, he would receive a call every 2 to 3 days after graduating from college. Now, he only received a call once every 10 days to half a month. The two brothers chatted for a while before Rinpoche asked, "Are you going to find a place for your internship at the end of the year? Do you have any plans?" "Brother, it's rare for you to think of me. Do you have a good job for me?" Renwanyan laughed. "Indeed, there are some things that I don't feel at ease without my family, Rinpoche replied. After all, he was rarely on Earth and still needed someone to take charge. Although Shen Feng was efficient, she was gradually starting to feel powerless. After all, she had come into contact with more and more things, and many of them were starting to exceed her capabilities. Furthermore, her background was also a big problem. As for Dingjie, although he was hardworking and willing to use his brain, he was a little timid due to his background. Although there were some changes after learning martial arts, it was still too early for him to take charge. Furthermore, there would be a lot of manpower needed in the future, so it was better to pull Ren Wanyan in as soon as possible. Brother, your way of thinking is outdated. You are now a professional manager. Although you can rest assured about the family business, there are still a lot of troublesome issues and constraints when it comes to development. I already have someone who wants me. Ren Wanyan laughed heartily. Oh, what's better than the opportunity one have here? Rinpoche asked with a smile. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Although it didn't feel like much time had passed, his younger brother had grown up. I have the same status as you, Ren Wanyan whispered in a mysterious tone. Although someone wanted him to keep it a secret, as a student without professional training, he didn't have a strong sense of confidentiality. It wasn't easy for him to hold back from telling his classmates, friends, and parents. Now that Rinpoche asked him about it, he finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Although Rinpoche rarely went home and rarely called him in the past few years, they had been together since they were young, so he was still very close to this brother of his. Moreover, he always felt that his brother wasn't at the same level as him. He had seen a lot of people and things and could help him come up with some ideas. Therefore, he leaked the information to Rinpoche. My status? Rinpoche asked. Soon after, he thought of a possibility and asked, a state agency? Although he rarely used this identity, everyone in his family knew that he had this identity. It was only because he went to Lu province to help Ren Wanyan solve his problem that he revealed this identity. That's right. Ren Wanyan replied. Rinpoche frowned. Ren Wanyan was just an ordinary third-year university student. What qualifications did he have to enter a state agency? He was entering a state agency, not an ordinary civil servant. Even if he was a civil servant, it wasn't time for him to take the exam yet. In that case, it could only be because of him. The state definitely wouldn't let him go so easily and would definitely do everything possible to tie him to the state. Ren Wanyan was one of them. Is it a research institute or a special affairs agency? Or is it a base? Rinpoche asked in a deep voice. Brother, do you know? Ren Wanyan was a little surprised. There were too many state agencies, and most people hadn't even heard of some of them. However, Rinpoche managed to guess it, which surprised him. Forget it, don't go. They are using you as a rope. Rinpoche said. What do you mean? Brother, what do you know? Ren Wanyan raised his voice and asked. Come to me. You will know when you have the chance in the future. I will let them know and they won't look for you again, Rinpoche said faintly. Brother, you are so powerful? Ren Wanyan asked in surprise. More powerful than you think. You will know when you come to work for me in the future. For example, when you enter a certain department, you have to be respectful to the leaders. When you come to work for me, you can do whatever you want and ignore them if you don't want. Rinpoche's tone was very calm, but Ren Wanyan felt that his brother was really different. Chapter 626. The next day, a pair of brothers in their 40s came to the villa. They looked almost identical. He was wearing a tang suit and was very thin. He had a mustache and thick knuckles on both of his hands. These two people from the martial arts world were hired by Rinpoche to train the winged cavalry. It was not martial arts, but some etiquette and methods of traditional martial arts. After all, the winged cavalry was too crude and barbaric. After all, modern society was a civilized society. No matter what it was, it had to be covered with a layer of civilized clothing. Only then would it be easier for people to accept it and appear to be of a higher class. His business license was a martial arts culture company. At least it had the word culture in it. Another reason was that there might be challengers after he opened a martial arts center. Ren Baqian was afraid that they would seriously injure or kill someone. As such, he needed to find someone to teach them. Through some people, he hired these two people from the martial arts world. His kung fu wasn't considered high, but even if it was useless. No matter how high his kung fu was, he wouldn't be able to reach the man-will level. Currently, those man-will experts were in a certain base in the country. Even if they were at the man-will level, they would be slapped into a wall by the winged cavalry. As a result, he found these two people through certain people to train the winged cavalry warriors. However, they were dumbfounded when they arrived outside the villa. He saw 7 or 8 burly men holding huge barbells as dumbbells in the courtyard. It was the kind that weighed at least 200 to 300 kilograms. There were thick plates of barbells on the side, and one in each hand was flipped up and down. The two of them almost thought that it was made of wood. In the end, someone threw the barbell to the side, and it immediately smashed a deep hole in the ground. Seeing this scene, the two of them were puzzled. With this level of skill, what else did he need them to do? Are there monsters in this yard? The two of them even had the thought of returning home on the spot. However, after thinking about it, they decided to give Ren Baqian a call. After all, it was not easy to make money in the traditional martial arts industry, especially when the two of them had no roots, no sect to rely on, and no idea how to make money. Moreover, the other party had offered a lot of money. With this money, he wouldn't have to worry for a few years. After receiving the call, Ren Baqian called out from the window, and a winged cavalry warrior walked toward the main gate. When the two of them saw the approaching winged cavalry, they immediately felt an immense mental pressure. When two people meet on a narrow path, the fat one wins. This was also useful in the martial arts world. All kinds of fighting competitions were divided into weight classes. Even the heavyweight class had a great advantage in terms of strength and endurance. The person in front of him was obviously a heavyweight. The other party's aura also made the two of them feel very uneasy. It was as if he was facing a ferocious tiger that was about to devour him. Before coming here, the two of them still had some confidence. However, after seeing this person, their confidence was immediately thrown out of the window. Most of the time, one would be able to sense the disparity between them without even having to compete. This was especially true for veterans like the two of them. They were good at judging people and sensing danger. The winged cavalry warrior sized up the two of them and said, "Follow me, the lady boss is waiting for you." After hearing this, the two of them thanked him and followed the winged cavalry through the courtyard. When they passed by those people, they had goosebumps all over their bodies. It was as if they were passing by a group of tigers. Before they entered the door, they thought they would see a beautiful young woman or something. However, when they entered the door, they saw a young man sitting on the sofa watching the news. When he saw the two of them, he nodded as a greeting. The two of them were still wondering who this person was when they heard the burly man who brought them here say, "Lady boss, he's here." F***ck off. Ren Baqian raised his eyebrows, grabbed a fruit knife, and threw it over. The lady boss was actually a man. The two brothers immediately thought of the wrong person. Coupled with the intimidating burly men outside, they immediately thought of Invincible East and Yang Lienting. In the blink of an eye, this villa had become the legendary Blackwood Cliff. Ren Baqian didn't notice their thoughts. After chatting with them for a while, he called the winged cavalry warrior in and said, "These two will be your etiquette teachers from now on. As usual, you can't hit, scold, threaten, or drink or play finger-guessing games with the teachers." As Ren Baqian spoke, a layer of sweat appeared on their foreheads. After Ren Baqian finished speaking, their backs were penetrated. "These people? Got it, lady boss." Ren Baqian's eyes widened, and the corners of his eyes twitched. He couldn't escape being called the lady boss anymore. This bunch of idiots was getting naughtier and naughtier. 2 days later, Ren Baqian returned to Dayo with an oversized loudspeaker. The next day, early in the morning, Ren Baqian appeared in front of the palace and waited outside with everyone. He held a loudspeaker that was half the size of a person in one hand and a box in the other. He attracted a lot of attention again. "Sir Ren, haven't you given up yet?" Shi Qing stepped forward and asked when he saw Ren Baqian. "There are always some things that have to be said." The old ways are already outdated, Renbachian replied. I'm looking forward to Sir Ren's ideas, but don't be too hasty. Shiqing laughed. Renbachian cupped his hands in gratitude. After a while, everyone entered the main hall. The Empress sat at the top, glanced at everyone's faces and said, I have something to report. Your Majesty, I have something to say. Renbachian stepped forward without waiting for the others to speak. In fact, the others were also waiting for him to speak. After all, looking at his posture, it seemed like he was here to talk about something. Speak. Everyone, do you still remember what our goal is in this war with the Yun nation? This time, we aren't going on horseback to rob and leave. Instead, we are going to occupy the entire Yun nation and incorporate it into Daeyo's territory. In the past, Daeyo even needed your Majesty to use the palace's treasury to subsidize our weapons. Why is that? It's because even though Daeyo has a vast territory, it doesn't have an abundance of minerals. Therefore, we have to incorporate the Yun nation into our territory, develop Daeyo with their mineral resources and technology, and supplement Daeyo with their resources. Everyone understood what Renbachian said and didn't have any objections. However, ruling a region isn't as simple as drawing a circle on the map and ruling over it. For example, what's the difference between having Tianjin Basin and not having it? We still have to expend troops to deal with them. The Yin nation is more important than Tianjin Basin and needs to be governed steadily in order to use its technology and resources to develop Daeyo. We can't be like before and order the local people around like cattle and horses. Tyranny works for a while, but not forever. Do you all still remember how the Hao nation perished? Sir Ren, how can the Hao nation be compared to our dynasty? Furthermore, the Yun nation, humph. Qin Chuan said with disdain when he mentioned the Yun nation. The Hao nation naturally can't be compared to our dynasty, and the Jing tribe can't be compared to the aboriginals. However, if we use tyranny to drive the people away, in the eyes of others, your Majesty will be viewed the same as how the late emperor and the martyrs viewed the Hao nation. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize it. The rise and fall of the previous dynasties have proven this point, Renbachian said in a powerful voice. As long as there are millions of aboriginals, so what if they are restless? Qin Chuan said even though he understood Renbachian's words. Argumentative spirit. Renbachian suddenly thought of this word. Force doesn't mean everything. Development is still the most important thing in the future. The future development will far exceed your imagination, and everything in the future will be completely different from the past. In order to achieve the blueprint in your Majesty's heart, everything must pave the way for peaceful development. Renbachian cupped his hands toward the Empress. Isn't this the way the world is? What's so unimaginable about it? Qin Chuan sneered. The blueprint in His Majesty's heart is that everyone can live a good life, no longer troubled by sickness and illness, food and clothing. Every child can go to school and learn knowledge that they are interested in. Everyone can have food to eat and books to read. Everyone can think for themselves. Everyone can have their own pursuits. Everyone no longer lives for the sake of survival, but lives for the sake of self-worth. Your Majesty's blueprint is for everyone in the world to be like dragons. Renbachian began to raise the banner. This was what the Empress envied when she first arrived on Earth. It was also something that she couldn't forget. Of course, for the current Daeyo, this was similar to achieving communism. However, if it was the blueprint in the Empress's heart, there wasn't any problem. After hearing what Renbachian said, the Empress recalled what she had seen, heard, and felt when she first arrived on Earth. She recalled her envy of that world. Although the Empress's expression didn't change, she was overwhelmed with emotions. As expected, Renbachian knew what she was thinking. Chapter 627. In fact, apart from the Empress, his words sounded like a dream to everyone else and were completely impossible to achieve. It was like someone saying that everyone would have an endless supply of gold in their home in the future. It was completely a dream. Many people even felt that this idea was too exaggerated. At the same time, they had a conjecture. Everyone knew that the Empress had changed a lot in the past year and trusted Renbaqian a lot. After listening to Renbaqian's words, they wondered if the Empress's change was due to his words. A world where everyone was like a dragon might interest the Empress, but it was impossible to achieve. They couldn't let the Empress immerse herself in this unrealistic idea. Nonsense. Tu Wan raised her eyebrows and reprimanded him. Are you questioning Her Majesty's grand plan? Renbaqian sneered. I'm not questioning Her Majesty. Please don't blame me, but I have a few words to say. Tu Wan cupped her hands at the Empress, stepped forward, and stared at Renbaqian. However, Sir Ren, what are you trying to achieve by using such words to confuse Her Majesty? My goal is to achieve Her Majesty's goal. What Her Majesty thinks is what I want to do. Where Her Majesty is looking is where I want to go. Renbaqian said while looking at Tu Wan. The Empress nodded gently. Renbaqian's words made her feel very comfortable. Sir Ren, do you think what you said can come true? Qin Chuan asked. Of course, it will come true in a few decades at most. Renbaqian was full of confidence. With the speed of technological development, it wasn't impossible to reach that stage as long as one could point out the key points, even if there weren't enough talents. Even if they couldn't reach that stage, it wouldn't be difficult for everyone to have food to eat and education to read. What happened when China was first established and what would happen in a few decades? When China was first established, who would have thought that it would reach that stage in 60 or 70 years? Moreover, Dayo was a powerful country. Even if its productivity was much worse than before, it would still be able to reach a stage that no one could even dream of. If they didn't take any detours and only corrected the problems, they would be able to reach a stage that no one could even dream of. A few decades? Tu Wan sneered. Who knew what would happen in a few decades? Would they let him do whatever he wanted? Even if they found out that everything they said was false, could they still kill Her Majesty's husband as a sacrifice to the heavens? A few decades is too far. I can't see it, Tu Wan said decisively. Tu Wan turned to the Empress and said, What Sir Ren said is excellent, but forgive me for speaking bluntly, I feel that it's impossible to achieve. Ko Zhihai, Qin Chuan, Tong Zhenye, Xian Hua and the others also responded. Even though Tong Zhenye and Renbaqian had a good relationship, this was a completely different matter. Tong Zhenye didn't wish for Renbaqian to convince Her Majesty to take Dayo down an impossible path. Renbaqian's voice was immediately drowned out by the crowd. If the voices of the crowd were like the surging waves of the sea, then his voice was like a lone boat in the sea that could capsize at the slightest wave and sink to the bottom of the sea. It was impossible to find him. More than a dozen loud voices that reached 100 decibels expressed their opinions, instantly turning the court into a vegetable market. Today, no one mentioned anything about the captive camp. Everyone was criticizing what Renbaqian had just said. It was as if they had to wake up the Empress, who had been bewitched by Renbaqian, and all of them looked distressed. Renbaqian sneered, raised the megaphone and said, Hello, hello, hello? Silence. With an ear-piercing sound, Renbaqian's voice directly suppressed everyone. Everyone heard him shout, Silence. Even the guards on the imperial city wall in the distance turned to look in the direction of the main hall with a curious look on their faces. Who exactly was speaking in such a loud voice? It was a full 130 decibels. Renbaqian's voice was like a lion's roar, and everyone was shocked. This was the case of the unreasonable meeting the more unreasonable and the louder meeting the louder. Everyone was shocked and stared strangely at the huge megaphone in Renbaqian's hand. They knew that Renbaqian had a purpose for bringing that strange thing, but they didn't expect it to be for this purpose. Renbaqian was very satisfied with this voice. Sure enough, one couldn't speak too softly in court. Only a loud voice would have the right to speak. The next time I get anxious, I'll use a 300 decibels ship's megaphone to perish together with you. No matter how big the Aboriginals' main hall was, it was still an enclosed space. 180 decibels was equivalent to the sound of a ton of TNT exploding from 70 meters away. If a 300 decibels megaphone was used in the main hall, everyone would probably be dumbfounded and have to rely on hearing aids for the rest of their lives. Renbaqian was determined. In fact, He had already expected everyone's reaction. After all, this was a difference in vision and philosophy. He also knew that if he didn't involve the court in the past and everything was done slowly, such a thing wouldn't have happened. If things were like now, it would easily cause a backlash from a large number of people. How many of the reformers in ancient times had a good ending? Although Daeyo didn't have that many traditional powers, the related interests and different philosophies would inevitably cause hostility from some people. Just like yesterday, he didn't want to affect the interests of others. If he touched the purse of the Ministry of Revenue, it would inevitably affect the other departments. In addition, if he didn't care about the annexation of the Yun nation, he didn't know how long he would have to take detours and how long he would have to clean up the mess. Ren Bachien had great confidence in the ability of the Aboriginals to govern. They would definitely mess it up. Therefore, if he wanted the future to go according to his and the Empress's plans, he had to stand up and make a voice. Sirs, please listen to me. Ren Bachien held the megaphone and spoke to the entire hall. This thing is interesting. Tong Jinye touched his chin and thought that Ren Bachien's voice could be so loud while speaking to this thing. If he were to use it, he was afraid that the whole city would hear him. Tong Jinye wanted to snatch the thing from Ren Bachien's hands when he imagined the scene of the whole city shaking. However, he suppressed this thought when he thought that the Empress was still sitting there. Everyone, do you think that Her Majesty will be deceived and put her mind on an impossible goal? Ren Bachien asked. Tong Jinye, Qin Chuan, Tu Wan. The rest. No one spoke. They all turned to look at Ren Bachien in unison. The back of their heads was facing the Empress, and their faces were filled with, "That's right." No matter how powerful Her Majesty was, she was only in her 20s. Even though she was the most powerful Aboriginals, everyone still felt that she had been bewitched by Ren Bachien. Looking at the land where Great Xia was located, many wise emperors in history had been bewitched, let alone Her Majesty. *CK. Ren Bachien cursed in his heart. What do you mean by that expression? Can it be any more obvious? Is Her Majesty that stupid? All of you, turn around. The Empress saw everyone turn around in unison and saw something from Ren Bachien's face. Her face immediately turned black, and her hair began to flutter. Of course, Her Majesty won't be deceived. Everyone turned around and immediately changed their expressions as if they had practiced face-changing in a Sichuan opera. All of you have a strong desire to live. Ren Bachien really wanted to say this. The Empress's gaze swept across everyone's faces. Her gaze was like a knife, and her ice-cold touch brushed across everyone's face. Continue, the Empress said. Don't tell me you think that Her Majesty will be bewitched by me? Ren Bachien asked insidiously. Everyone. The Empress's seat suddenly became empty. A red figure passed through the hall, and more than a dozen people were shot into the wall by the Empress. Chapter 628. Everyone pulled themselves down from the wall and felt as if their bones had fallen apart. They hated Ren Bachien to death, but they looked honest on the surface. They naturally knew that they had been tricked by Ren Bachien, but they couldn't control their expressions. If they could control their expressions, they wouldn't be Aboriginals. In fact, most of them had strange expressions on their faces at that time. Many of them tried their best to remain calm, but their faces were distorted. Do you think I'm ignorant and easy to bully? The Empress said with a murderous look. She squinted her phoenix eyes and scanned the people below. We don't dare, everyone quickly said, but their expressions betrayed them. Seeing this, the Empress became even angrier. Her upper body swayed, and a series of bricks flew out and smashed into everyone's heads. Immediately, the hall was filled with broken pieces flying all over the place. Since you don't dare, then shut up. The Empress was domineering. Ren Bachien then continued, let's talk about your concerns first. The national treasury is empty. With the current situation, it's already good enough to maintain the status quo. If the money is used for other purposes, there will be a shortage somewhere. Ren Bachien finally said something that everyone was willing to hear. However, everything is developing and changing. The Yun nation is smaller than Daeyo, but the annual revenue from the national treasury is 5.5 times that of Dayo. It's 5,000 taels of silver, which is half of Great Xia's. This is under the circumstances where the warlords of the Yun nation have their own armies and it's difficult for central orders to spread throughout the country. But why does the national treasury's revenue far exceed that of Dayo under such circumstances? Ren Baqin asked. Everyone was silent as this was a slap in the face. The Yun nation is rich in minerals. However, as far as I know, a large portion of the minerals in the Yun nation are also given to the warlords. Only some of the gold and silver mines are controlled by the imperial court. In fact, you all know that the Yun nation is prosperous with commerce. A large portion of the revenue from the Yun nation's treasury comes from taxes. The cities of the Yun nation only pay half of the taxes to the imperial court every year, which is a total of 30 million taels of silver. The tax revenue of the entire Yun nation can reach at least 60 million taels of silver every year. In fact, Dayo has also formulated taxes according to the Hao nation system. The annual revenue is about half of the national treasury's revenue, which is about 5 million taels of silver. Most of this 5 million taels of silver comes from the taxes paid by merchants from various countries. Of course, one of the reasons was that the late emperor sympathized with the people and reduced taxes. Another reason was that Dayo didn't have any commerce. There is also a lack of commercial soil. The fundamental reason for this was that the commoners did not have money. Most of the time, they were still at the stage of bartering and exchanging for survival necessities. Naturally, there was no commercial ground, and naturally, there was no tax. Only when the common people became rich would they be able to form the soil for commerce. Only then would there be more taxes, and the national treasury would be more abundant. This was a virtuous cycle. A country would only be prosperous if its people were prosperous. If the people are poor, the country can't be rich. Ren Baqin began to lecture everyone. Tu Wan and the other officials of the Ministry of Revenue were deep in thought. They had thought of many of these things. After all, they had been in this position for so many years, it was impossible for them to not think of anything. However, it was the first time he had heard of this saying that the country would only be prosperous if the people were prosperous. Thinking about it, it made some sense. However, even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. Even if they knew, they couldn't change the current situation. Or rather, they didn't have the ability to change the current situation. If you want all the people to become rich, you must first develop the country. This is a contradiction. Only when the country develops will the people be prosperous. When the people are prosperous, the country will have more taxes, the national treasury will have more wealth, and Dayo will be able to develop. If you want to move forward step by step, you don't know how long it will take. However, there is a shortcut now, and that is the Yun nation. The resources and wealth of the Yun nation are what we want. As long as the Yun nation is incorporated into Dayo, first of all, the national treasury will be full. Secondly, we can use this wealth to accelerate the development of Dayo. However, do we rely on robbing to obtain the wealth of the Yun nation? Robbing without governance is a one-sided deal. It will only drag the Yun nation into a quagmire and become what Dayo is now. This time, Ren Baqin didn't talk about the blueprint. Instead, he talked about how the country would develop and the source of its income. After he finished speaking, he paused for a while and waited for everyone to digest his words. What he said was very simple, and even an ordinary junior high school student could understand it. However, these Dayo officials took a long time to digest it, and they were all deep in thought. It wasn't that the junior high school students on Earth were smarter than these Dayo officials, but that the information channels of both parties were completely different. What they learned and knew was also completely different. Ren Baqin had something else to say, but he swallowed it back down. When a backward civilization ruled an advanced civilization, it would cause a regression of civilization and wealth in the early stages. This had been proven many times. In Dayo, this situation was even more serious because the Aboriginals believed too much in force and didn't know much about other things. For example, the original Hao nation was ruled by the Aboriginals for 70 years. As a result, it was clear from the situation of the people in Tianjing Basin. Principal Ren, continue with your ideas. After a while, Shi Qing looked up and smiled at him. Therefore, we can't destroy the Yun nation. Instead, we have to develop it peacefully and maintain its prosperity. The annual income is at least tens of millions of taels of silver, which is enough to fill the national treasury. With Her Majesty's ruling power, she definitely won't let the cities of the Yun nation have their own armies like before. The annual income is at least 50 to 60 million taels of silver. Then, the talents and wealth of the Yun nation will be used to drive the development of Dayo. Ren Baqian's idea was China's national policy. On the one hand, the entire country should develop science and technology. On the other hand, the rich should drive the rich of the later generations. That's why I mentioned treating the captives well and paying them wages. Other things are fine, but not this. Tu Wan exploded when she heard Ren Baqian mention money. Even though Tu Wan was a woman, if he had a choice, he really wanted to kick her out of the family. He didn't need to say anything. At this moment, the Empress finally opened her mouth and shouted, Tu Wan, shut up. Her aura was also released, pressing down on Tu Wan like a huge mountain. What we need to do now is to build 3 cement roads, strengthen the transportation force, and ensure that there are no obstacles. The first road leads to the Yun nation, which is the most important. One leads to Ping City, and the other leads to the 60,000 mountains. In addition to these 3 roads, there is also a lot of infrastructure construction. Therefore, the number of laborers required isn't a small number. We need millions of laborers. This time, we want to bring the Yun nation under Your Majesty's rule, so we can't blindly exploit them like before. On the one hand, we have to deal with the public opinion of the Yun nation. On the other hand, we have to give these people some hope and give them the hope of survival in order to maximize their effectiveness. Therefore, these people will have to be released sooner or later. By then, these people will already be skilled craftsmen, so we have to think of a way to keep them here. Ren Baqian repeated what he had said to the Empress before. From the value of these craftsmen to the impact that millions of prisoners of war would have on society after returning to the Yun nation, he explained the importance of keeping these people here. By the time he finished speaking, it was already noon, and Ren Baqian's mouth was dry from talking. He looked at Tu Wan, who was drenched from head to toe. The Empress's aura was firmly locked onto her, making her feel like she was carrying a huge mountain. She couldn't even open her mouth. Your Majesty, let go of Minister Tu. Ren Baqian turned to the Empress. Tu Wan then staggered and almost fell to the ground. After we occupy the Yun nation, it may not be as Principal Ren said. I won't agree to pay them unless someone else takes this position, Tu Wan said stubbornly as soon as she steadied herself. Fortunately, apart from Tu Wan, everyone else was thinking about Ren Baqian's words. In fact, the Ministry of Revenue's situation will have greatly improved by then. However, if you are worried about the state treasury being empty, there is no need to pay real money. You can first issue vouchers to the captive camp to replace the use of silver. After that, you can settle the payment with the merchants who provide the supplies. After Ren Baqian finished speaking, someone immediately asked about the vouchers. Ren Baqian explained the vouchers again. In fact, they were ordinary paper vouchers that could be exchanged for silver, but there was no need to take out the silver immediately. Using the vouchers as an opportunity, Ren Baqian was also preparing to create banks and banknotes. These people would be the first users of banknotes. After they were released, it would be easy for them to accept banknotes. He had long had enough of people carrying a bag of gold for him when he went out to buy things. Also, if the state treasury doesn't improve its tax collection, I will be responsible for paying for it, Ren Baqian finally said. I have a glass factory and spices. You won't doubt my ability to pay for it, right? What Principal Ren said makes sense. Shi Qing was the first to nod, and everyone else agreed. Ren Baqian's words had indeed convinced them. Not only did they not doubt Ren Baqian's ability to pay for it, but they were also envious of the income from the spices. It wasn't that they didn't know the amount of spices harvested this time. After all, many people were paying attention to this matter. If Ren Baqian were to sell all the spices this time around, It could be said that he had earned 10 years' worth of the imperial family's income. Therefore, everyone had no doubt that this matter would be settled as long as the empress agreed. In any case, those things belonged to the empress. As for the empress, she naturally wouldn't object at this time. This time, even Tu-1 didn't object. It was fine as long as the money wasn't taken out from the state treasury. If it was really as Rinpoche said, there would be tens of millions of taels of silver every year. In that case, the money could be taken out from the state treasury. Since Tu-1 didn't speak, the others wouldn't either. Rinpoche's mouth was dry from all the talking. When he returned to the empress's quarters, he drank a few big bowls of water. In any case, he had finally convinced them to carry out this idea. Chapter 629. Both of Rinpoche's eyes were tightly shut, and a layer of earthy yellow color flashed across his body. Following which, that layer of earthy yellow color gradually shrunk, concentrated at a point on his chest, and gradually disappeared. However, his body was covered in a layer of sweat. After a short while, he opened his eyes and woke up. His body wasn't as tired as it was after cultivating, but was full of energy. Rinpoche clenched his fist and felt that his strength had increased a little. He brandished his fists again, this time at a faster speed. It had been half a year since his last breakthrough, and he had finally broken through again. After breaking through the visualization of Earth, other than increasing his strength and speed, his internal organs had also been strengthened. This was the most unique aspect of the Rui visualization. At the very least, other cultivation techniques didn't have this effect. All of the techniques were external to internal. Only this Rui visualization, of unknown origins, was a combination of internal and external cultivation. Cultivating each of the 5 visions would strengthen the corresponding internal organs. After breaking through the visualization of Earth, his spleen had been strengthened. The spleen contained one's will, which affected the activity of one's thoughts. Rinpoche felt that he would become smarter and sharper after breaking through to this level. However, this could not be verified yet. It had only been a year since he started practicing Rui visualization, but he had already completed 4 levels: visualization of water, visualization of wood, visualization of fire, and visualization of earth. All that was left was the visualization of metal, after which he would be able to break through to the earth wheel level. At that time, he would be considered an earth wheel expert. Of course, this 1 year was in quotation marks. In fact, including the time on Earth, it was a full 2 years. He had also eaten some natural treasures, such as Su-Wen's peaches, which he had already eaten 4 of. He had also killed Lu Pinghai and obtained the spirit primary pill. He had also exchanged the electric baton with Ning Kaichen for the Shueka. However, after reaching this step, more than half of the medicinal power stored in his body had been used up. If he wanted to break through to the next level, he would need more time. Rinpoche had no choice but to admit that his innate talent wasn't considered outstanding. Fortunately, he had a large number of herbs and treasures that allowed him to reach this stage. When he reached the earth wheel level, he would be able to marry the empress. When he thought of marrying the empress, he would be able to embrace a woman who was at the top of the world. When he thought of the empress's request, his heart was filled with anticipation. At that time, would the empress be shy and bashful? It was definitely impossible for her to act like an ordinary girl. At that time, she wouldn't become angry out of embarrassment, right? Rinpoche felt that he still needed to learn martial arts such as the Golden Bell Shield and Iron Skin technique. It was much more important than the Fist of Death or the Hunter technique. After lying in bed for a long time, he finally fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Rinpoche got dressed and headed to Black Bamboo Academy. It had been a week since the debate in the imperial court. Today was a special day for the Black Bamboo Academy, the start of the 2nd batch of students. This time, there were 80 new students. Almost all of the good-for-nothings in the imperial court had been sent here last time. This time, there were very few children of officials who had been selected. Commoners made up the majority of the students, a total of 76 people. Early in the morning, Rinpoche stood at the entrance of the academy with his hands clasped behind his back. In the distance, there were a few students laughing and waiting to see what his junior brothers and sisters were like. "Greetings, Principal." Not long after, two teenagers came over together. When they saw Rinpoche standing there, they immediately bowed respectfully. Then, they signed their names on the table beside them and followed Rinpoche's directions to the newly built classroom in the second row. Following the arrival of these two, the other students also rushed over. The previous batch of students were pointing at them from afar. This group of students wasn't smart at other times, but they were self-taught now when they put on airs as seniors. When everyone arrived, Rinpoche closed the door and moved the robot into the classroom to teach the first batch of students. The robot this time was custom-made after Tong Lan tore it apart. Compared to the previous robot, it was more technologically advanced and had a better artificial intelligence. Rinpoche moved the robot into the room and removed the cloth covering it. The students in the classroom were all dumbfounded. It can't be, right? How is this possible? Then, all of them turned their heads to Tong Lan with expressions of shock. This time, the appearance wasn't that of a Gundam, but Tong Jingye. Furthermore, it was a lifelike Tong Jingye. At least, the head didn't look much different. The upper body was still that of a real person. Furthermore, the muscles were specially made according to Tong Jingye's style and were covered in the clothes that Tong Jingye always wore. As for the lower body, it had 4 legs. Rinpoche glanced at Tong Lan and saw that she was indeed sitting there with a dull look on her face. She pointed at the robot and opened her mouth for a long time. "Grandpa?" Rinpoche chuckled in his heart. "This time, you can tear it apart. Tear it apart. If you dare to tear it apart, I will dare to tell that old bastard Tong Jingye that your granddaughter dismembered you. If anyone else dared to tear it apart, Tong Lan would fight it out with them." "Grandpa!" Tong Lan came back to her senses after a long time and screamed, "That's impossible. I just saw Grandpa this morning. This is fake." "Nonsense. This is your tutor, not Minister Tong. He just looks a little similar." Rinpoche glared at her. "Of course, this is fake. Is there a need to ask? If Tong Lan hadn't seen Tong Jingye this morning, she wouldn't have thought that I modified her grandpa into this, right?" Everyone was stunned. It wasn't just a little similar, it was exactly the same, except for the 4 legs below. "Then why does it look exactly like my grandpa?" Tong Lan slammed the table, shattering it into pieces. Her hair stood on end. "How would I know why they look exactly the same? This thing is just like humans. They all look different, but there is a small probability that they look similar. This situation is called a face-to-face collision," Rinpoche said confidently. Everyone had a doubtful look on their faces. "Is this for real? In any case, he will be your tutor from now on. When I'm not around, ask him anything you don't know. As for the method, it will be the same as before," Rinpoche said. After he finished speaking, Rinpoche ignored everyone and went to speak to the new students. Fortunately, almost all the students this time were commoners. They were much more obedient than Tong Lan's batch, so Rinpoche didn't waste too much of his time. He then found a student to teach them the 3-character classic and simplified Chinese characters. Previously, there was only one batch of students, and Rinpoche could barely teach them all. This time, there was another batch of students. Rinpoche had to find a few commoners with better grades from the previous batch of students to be his teaching assistants and rotate them every day. With the assistance of the robot, he could barely teach 2 batches of students. As soon as Rinpoche left the classroom, Li Fu grabbed him by the collar and asked, "Kid, when can you make what I want?" "Haste makes waste. Sir Tong has already sent people to the south to look for rubber. They have already found it and are sending it back. If these things are what I want, we can start making them soon," Rinpoche said unhurriedly. "Kid, hurry up. I can't wait any longer." Li Fu let go of Rinpoche, flipped over, and landed on the roof. He wasn't so anxious in the past, but after seeing Rinpoche release the Kong Ming lanterns during the new year, he felt as if grass had grown in his heart, and he couldn't wait to fly into the sky. Rinpoche waved at Li Fu and left on his own. Chapter 630. Although it was Dayo's New Year and the lantern-grabbing contest, the progress of the steam train made by the students hadn't fallen behind at all. Even during the holidays, the students would still go to the school for a day. After school on the first day, Renbachien went to the backyard to take a look. The steam train had already taken shape. However, the problem was that there wasn't enough iron. Even though the steam train was much smaller and simpler than the ones Renbachien had seen before, the amount of iron was still less than half. Renbachien looked for the Empress and transferred 8,000 kilograms of iron to the school. Including the previous one, there was a total of 5,000 kilograms of iron to make the steam train and lay a circle of rails in the backyard of the school. After that, Renbachien went to the captive camp. Currently, there were 80,000 captives in the camp. More than 10,000 of them had already been sent to other places to mine gravel. Next, some would be arranged to expand the cement factory and the rest would be sent to build roads. Renbachien walked around the captive camp. Although it still didn't meet his requirements, it was already much better than before. With the implementation of the regulations, especially after the division of the captive camp into groups, small groups, medium groups, and large groups, the camp was organized according to the large groups and was now much more orderly. At the same time, the environment in the camp was much cleaner. Everyone was forced to take a bath, and there was a public toilet every 100 meters. This prevented diseases from spreading easily in the camp. Renbachien walked around, pointed out 2 places that he felt were inappropriate, and asked the auxiliary commandant to find a few deputy captains and team leaders to inquire about the situation here. When the 4 of them saw Renbachien, they were very cautious and fearful. "How's the camp now?" Renbachien asked as he sat in a newly built wooden house with green sprouts. Pretty good, pretty good. There's meat to eat every day," the few of them quickly replied, afraid that they would offend the person in front of them. "Oh, if there's any problem, it's best to say it now. After this, there won't be another chance," Renbachien said indifferently. "There's no problem, but sir, will we really be released?" Someone asked cautiously. He didn't dare to believe the news when he heard it. Not only him, but many people in the camp also didn't dare to believe such a good thing. However, they didn't dare to disbelieve it. Having such hope was better than dying here. 8 years. You can leave after 8 years. Whether it's true or not, you'll know when the time comes. However, before that, all of you have to work hard and live well," Renbachien said faintly. "Thank you for informing me, my lord." "Thank you, my lord." "If there's nothing else, you may leave," Renbachien said faintly. "Milord, speak." "Can you give us some grass to eat?" Perhaps it was because Renbachien didn't look ferocious, they mustered up their courage and asked cautiously. This was the first time Renbachien had heard such a request, and he couldn't react in time. "What happened?" "Sir, this place is great. We have meat to eat every day, but we really can't digest it. These days, many people have diarrhea. If this continues, I really can't stand it." The few of them were about to cry. Renbachien asked again and finally understood. One had to know that in the Yun nation, no one would only eat meat for every meal. Not to mention that they couldn't afford it. Even if they could afford it, they wouldn't do so. Firstly, it was too greasy, and secondly, it was hard to digest. The captive camp was filled with meat soup, fatty meat, and internal organs every day. At first, many people thought it was good that there was meat to eat. However, after 10 days, these people finally realized that eating meat was such a painful thing. One had to know that the Aboriginals were generally at the man-will level and needed to consume large amounts of food to convert essence and blood. Therefore, they had a strong digestive ability. However, these captives didn't have strong stomachs like the Aboriginals, and they didn't have vegetables or tea leaves to clean their stomachs. After 10 days, their eyes were green, and they walked with their heads down every day, hoping to find something green. However, even the weeds in the captive camp had been pulled out by them. Now, more than half of the people in the camp had diarrhea every day. Renbachien touched his nose. It was really an unexpected request and answer. Even he didn't expect such a thing. Presumably, not many people would have thought of such a thing. While Renbachien was in the captive camp, a young lady came to the outskirts of the city. She was in her 20s, and her appearance could be considered beautiful. However, her wide forehead somewhat affected her facial features. However, her pair of eyes that were as bright as the stars were unforgettable. Instead, people would overlook her appearance. The lady was dressed in a white muslin dress, which was obviously in the style of Great Xia. She wore a pair of embroidered cloth shoes and carried a long sword in a green scabbard on her back. "Where did you come from?" As soon as they saw the woman's appearance and attire, the guards had fierce expressions on their faces, and they drew their swords. "A messenger from the north with a token." The lady immediately flipped her hand and took out a token. The guards checked it before letting her in. That lady was naturally Qing Lian, who had rushed all the way from Great Xia. "Is this Lan City?" Qing Lian walked through the city gate and sized up the surroundings. It is indeed a barren land, Qing Lian thought. From what she could see, the road was deserted, and the buildings on both sides were rather dilapidated. Compared to the bustling capital of Great Xia, it was more than 10 times worse. Among the passers-by, she could actually see many people directly wrapped a piece of animal skin around their waist, which was definitely not seen in Great Xia. However, what followed was endless admiration for the talents of the Aboriginals. Any commoner on the street was equivalent to a Great Xia man-wheel expert, and they were even more vigorous. Although earth-wheel experts weren't everywhere, they weren't rare along the way. After walking for a while, Qing Lian asked someone for the location of the Black Bamboo Academy and watched 2 street fights before arriving at the academy. "Is this the school's closed?" Qing Lian walked around outside and saw the tightly shut gate. She also sensed the auras of a few man-wheel and earth-wheel experts inside and guessed. Since she was here, she might as well see what fun things there were in this Dayo school. In any case, even if she was caught, she could say that she was here to deliver a letter. Those who didn't know wouldn't be blamed. Moreover, there were only a few people in the courtyard who couldn't even detect her presence. There were only a few people in Dayo who could make her feel apprehensive, and Qi Zixiao was the only one in Lan City. Although he couldn't defeat the other Cardinal Heaven experts in Dayo's imperial court, he could still escape. She made up her mind and jumped over the courtyard wall. What she saw made her a little disappointed. It was simply too simple and ordinary. Not to mention comparing it to the Imperial Academy of Great Xia, any small academy would be 100 times better than this. However, since she was already here, she had to go in and take a look. After scouting out the location of the few people in the academy, Qing Lian first went into a room and saw that it was filled with tables and chairs. She then went to another room and saw a person standing in the corner. She was shocked and asked, "Who is it?" After a few breaths, Qing Lian saw that the person in the corner didn't have any reaction and felt strange. More importantly, there wasn't any aura of a living person on him. She went forward to take a closer look and immediately gasped. She saw that the person was an old man in his 50s or 60s who looked rather robust. However, his lower body actually had 4 legs. This really surprised her. Furthermore, the 4 legs looked like they were attached from the back. Qing Lian thought about it a few times but couldn't figure out the use of 4 legs on a dead person. She went forward to take a closer look, but still couldn't figure out the gist of it. She didn't know what the 4-legged corpse touched, but a sound came from the body and it suddenly opened its eyes. Qing Lian was shocked. In a flash, she landed at the door and stared at the corpse. "Little girl, you'd better leave. If you break it, I'm afraid that fellow will be angry." The voice of an old man sounded behind Qing Lian. Qing Lian's hair stood on end. How could someone be so close to me without me noticing? Was this a human or a ghost? Qing Lian drew her sword, turned around, and in one breath, slashed horizontally behind her. Then, the old man behind Qing Lian kicked her groin. "Shameless!" Qing Lian was furious, and her face was so red that it looked like blood was dripping from it. How could there be such a shameless person in this world? Sure enough, people had their own underlings. That Rinpochen wasn't a good person, and the people in his academy were equally shameless and despicable. Qing Lian used 3 lightning-fast strikes in a row. She didn't linger and disappeared from the courtyard in a flash. After leaving for a long time, Qing Lian was still resentful. She had never met such a shameless person in her life. He was simply too shameless. She would never let him off. And that Ren Ba Qian. Chapter 631. Qing Lian left Black Bamboo Academy and had nowhere to go. She wanted to find Ning Kaichen, but she had no clue and could only wander around Lan City. After a short while, she arrived outside the Imperial Glass Shop. Looking at the clean and bright glass shop that seemed to be covered with a layer of crystals, she became curious and strode in. The glass shop had been open for 3 months, and the initial crowd had died down a lot. Although there were still a lot of people coming in to look at the exquisite glassware, there weren't many people in the shop at the same time, and even fewer people were buying. However, it still brought him tens of thousands of taels of silver in profit every month. At this moment, he was ready to open the glass shop in Tianjing Basin. Although the people there were poor, there were more rich people than in Lan City. Then, after conquering the Yun Nation, he would open a glass shop in the Yun Nation. He would definitely be able to make a fortune. Qing Lian didn't look at the glassware first. Instead, she looked at the shop assistants with wide foreheads and deep eye sockets. They were obviously not aboriginals. I wonder if these people have seen Ning Kaichen before. Qing Lian thought for a while and looked at the glassware on the shelves. Beautiful! Qing Lian looked at the glassware on the shelves and immediately fell in love with it. In particular, she liked a tea set. After asking about the price, she found that it was only 800 taels of silver, which made her feel that it was cheap. She had never seen such a crystal tea set before. Although she didn't know what the glass was, it was fine as long as it looked good. After asking about a few more glasses, she found that they were only 150 taels each, which made her want to buy a cart of glasses when she returned. The only problem was that she only had 200 taels of gold with her. Although she still had some banknotes, there was no place in Dayo where she could exchange them. It seemed like she had to get Su Qing to send her some money. If Zhang Junjing was here, he would tell her that the aboriginals only bought glasses for 10 taels each and a glass tea set for 50 taels. For the aboriginals, the price had increased by 15 times. However, at this moment, Qing Lian truly felt that these glassware were being sold cheaply. If these things were in Great Xia, they would be several times more expensive, and there would be no place to buy them. After staying in the glass shop for half a day, Qing Lian left with satisfaction. At least she had gained something from this trip to Dayo. He didn't walk far on the street before he found an even bigger harvest: spices. After eating 2 slices of roasted mutton, Qing Lian's eyes lit up as she touched the bag she carried with her. She made up her mind to send a letter to Su Qing and ask him to send her money. He wanted all the glassware and spices. Qing Lian found a restaurant and waited there until the glass shop and condiment shop closed. Qing Lian followed the shop assistants all the way back to Jing Street. Only then did she find out that this was where the Jing tribe lived. If Ning Kaichen is in Lan City, he is most likely here. Qing Lian walked around Jing Street and saw the small tavern opposite the exit of Jing Street. This is the exit. Let's go inside and ask around. Qing Lian thought for a while and went straight to the tavern. While she was still outside, she could hear the clamor inside. The doors and windows of the tavern were all open. One could see that the tavern was not big, but there were many people inside. It was almost full. There weren't many people from the Jing tribe. Instead, it was filled with aboriginals. A young lady was busy inside, teasing the customers from time to time, causing them to burst into laughter. I have never seen someone as lovely as you. If I were a few years younger, I might have snatched you back. A burly man with a big beard laughed maniacally. You have to ask Sir Ren. I am Sir Ren's woman now. The lady inside spoke gently. Her voice was extremely charming and made one's heart skip a beat. Qing Lian entered the tavern and saw the burly man laughing maniacally. She was shocked, took a few steps back, and stared dumbfoundedly at the burly man. The corpse she saw in the afternoon was actually alive. Moreover, it was emitting the energy waves of a cardinal heaven expert. Her gaze subconsciously drifted to the lower half of the burly man's body. It was actually 2 legs. Where did those legs go? The corpse in the room, the eyes that suddenly opened, the 4 legs, and the man at this moment. Strange. It was really too strange. Qing Lian appeared at the door and took a few steps back in shock, attracting the attention of many people in the tavern. Most of them looked at her face and then at the sword on her back. When did such a person from Great Xia come to Lan City? She was quite good-looking. Soon after, everyone turned around and started to drink. Not long after, people started to leave. They were all here for the lady boss. Now that Tong Jinye was here, the others couldn't beat him, especially the children of the officials. They didn't dare to breathe too loudly and left after drinking. When there were fewer people, Qing Lian went in to find an empty table and sat down. "Miss, are you from afar?" Ning Kaichen sat opposite Qing Lian and looked at her. "Sister, you are so beautiful," Qing Lian exclaimed in admiration. She had to admit that the woman in front of her was the most feminine and seductive she had ever seen. Even though she was just sitting there without speaking, her gaze seemed to speak. Her voice was even more seductive after she spoke. If she were a man, she would definitely snatch this woman home. Unfortunately, she was a woman. This damned vixen in front of her. She hated this kind of vixen the most. She seduced men every day. How shameless could she be? Women didn't need a reason to hate women. "She's from Great Xia and just arrived today," Qing Lian said in admiration. "It's rare to see people from Great Xia." Ning Kaichen laughed. "Sister, you haven't seen people from Great Xia before?" "I haven't seen them in the past 6 months. What would you like to drink, miss?" "A pot of the best wine." Ning Kaichen served a pot of fruit wine. It tasted sweet and sour, a little astringent, and the wine was cloudy. In Qing Lian's opinion, it was inferior wine. However, it was already considered good wine here. Ning Kaichen sat opposite Qing Lian. She felt cordial when she met people from Great Xia. Qing Lian was even more eager to do so. She was here to inquire about information. "Where you from, sister?" Qing Lian asked. "I'm also from Great Xia." Ning Kaichen pursed her lips and smiled. "We are fellow countrymen after leaving our homeland. Why is sister here? It's not suitable to stay here for a long time." Qing Lian laughed. One could imagine how difficult it was for such a charming woman to live alone in a place full of mountain people and boorish men. Furthermore, she didn't know any martial arts. At the very least, Qing Lian could sense that her qi and blood were that of an ordinary person, at most a little more abundant. In fact, she would be the same if she left her sword. It was just that there were very few sword masters, and most of them lived in the wilderness, deep in the mountains, and she didn't expect that the charming woman who ran a tavern and teased the aboriginals here was actually a sword master. "I have a home, but I can't go back. I have nowhere to go and can only drift like duckweed." Ning Kaichen laughed and didn't look disappointed. "I heard someone call you sister just now. Is your surname Ning? Do you know the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy?" Qing Lian pretended not to care and asked, but she really wanted to hear the other party's answer. Could it be that the gigolo Qi Zixiao was keeping someone else outside? Did Qi Zixiao know? This was Lan City. Could he really hide it from Qi Zixiao? If Qi Zixiao knew, how could he tolerate it? She was a little curious about what was going on. If there was a chance, she wouldn't mind tricking Renbaqian and taking her revenge. "My surname is Ning. As for Sir Ren, we can be considered old acquaintances." Qing Lian took note of this and decided to slowly inquire about this matter. She took out a portrait from her bag and asked, "Sister, have you seen this person before?" Ning Kaichen looked at the person in the portrait and was slightly stunned. She then laughed and said, "Yes, I have. Is there something you need from him? Could it be that he did something wrong to you, and you chased him all the way from Great Xia?" Qing Lian was overjoyed when she heard this. She thought that she was indeed smart and quick-witted to have found out about this on her first day here. "He owes me a debt. I wonder where he is now." After Qing Lian finished speaking, Ning Kaichen shook her head and said, "In that case, he must owe you a lot of money. I haven't seen him since the middle of last year, and I don't know where he is now. Perhaps he has left Lan City?" Qing Lian was slightly disappointed. It seemed that she still had to stay in Lon City for a while, and she didn't know where to find that guy. She then asked some more questions, but Ning Kaichen didn't reveal that he was Ning Kaichen. She didn't know his identity, but he could detect her identity as a sword master. After all, she carried a sword with her, and he was familiar with spirit swords and could easily tell. Based on the feeling that her spirit sword gave him, she was probably more powerful than him. Only a fool would expose himself in such a situation. He had to find out why she was looking for him. Sister, how should I address you? Ning Kaichen. Good name. It's similar to the person I'm looking for. Qing Lian was surprised, but she still couldn't connect this charming lady in front of her with the scholar she was looking for. Sister, do you know where to stay nearby? Qing Lian asked again. If you don't mind, I have an empty room here, Ning Kaichen said. Chapter 632. Ren Baqian met Qing Lian the next day. He was giving a lesson to the new students when Shi came in to report, Sir, someone is looking for you. It's a woman from Great Xia, and she looks pretty. Someone from Great Xia? Looking for me? Ren Baqian thought for a while and asked, Did she tell me why she's here? The person from Great Xia looking for him should be sent by Su Qing. She said that she has some news to inform you, Shi replied. Ren Baqian looked at the time. The next lesson was about to start and said, Find a place to let her wait for a while. After a while, Shi brought Qing Lian to the courtyard, pointed at her feet, and said, Wait here. He then stood aside and scanned Qing Lian's body from head to toe. Qing Lian's eyes twitched a few times. At least find a room with a chair and tea, but he actually made her wait in the courtyard? Also, this damned guy next to her looked as if he wanted to strip her naked. Coupled with that shameless old thief from yesterday, Qing Lian was sure that everyone in the academy was shameless. She had seen two people like this, which showed the atmosphere in the academy. As the saying went, follow the example of your superiors. What kind of person could Ren Baqian be? In addition, he actually made her wait in the courtyard under the sun, which made Qing Lian even more dissatisfied. Especially as time passed, this resentment continued to intensify. But soon, her attention was attracted by a clear voice coming from the classroom. Energy will not disappear out of thin air, nor will it be produced out of thin air. It will only transform from one form to another, or transfer from one object to another. In the process of transformation and transfer, the total amount of energy remains the same. Let me give you the simplest example. Eating is absorbing the energy in food and transforming it into essence blood. During a fight, essence blood will be consumed, so after a fight, one has to eat food to replenish the energy in the body. Teacher, the energy obtained from eating food is obviously not as much as the energy from the food itself. For example, the sharp-toothed tiger can reach the Kismet heaven level. If a four-way heaven person eats a Kismet heaven animal, he won't be able to reach the Kismet heaven level. Qing Lian was very interested in the conversation in the classroom. She subconsciously took a few steps forward to listen more clearly. That's because the energy will dissipate. When an animal died, its body could no longer be controlled, and the energy contained in its body would begin to dissipate. Especially the energy contained in blood essence, which dissipated extremely quickly. After that, this energy would return to the world and drift in the air, and be absorbed by people, animals, or plants. It was just like how crops grew exceptionally well after a rotting corpse was buried underground. The energy in the cells would dissipate more slowly. This was because the cells would not die immediately. Instead, they would die in batches over time. While the cells were still alive, the energy would not immediately dissipate. However, it also consumed energy to maintain the survival of these cells. Therefore, as time passed, the energy in the cells would gradually decrease. Everything in the world is made up of energy. Every cell in those corpses is also made up of energy. This is why we can still replenish our energy by eating animal corpses. Teacher, your words are too disgusting. Tong Lan immediately protested. Although it was true that eating meat was eating animal corpses, it still made them feel a little weird. The energy dissipation that Rinpoche was talking about was the research result of the Messier 87 department's laboratory. After obtaining the corpses of experts that Rinpoche took away, the laboratory's research on the energy contained in the human body progressed very quickly. The research results were just right for this lecture. Another point is that we are also consuming energy all the time to maintain our own survival. At the same time, every movement we make consumes energy, even the simplest breathing. Rinpoche then used the steam engine and swing that they were researching as examples to illustrate the transformation and transmission of energy, as well as the effects it would be affected. Qing Lian, who was outside, was a little absent-minded. She was shocked by what Rinpoche was talking about. The content of Rinpoche's lecture reminded her of the Sword Master and the Spirit Sword. The Sword Master used his lifespan to support the Spirit Sword. The more powerful the Spirit Sword and the more times it was used, the faster the Sword Master's lifespan would decrease. Using precious herbs and minerals to nourish the sword could reduce the speed at which the Sword Master's lifespan decreased. Speaking of which, there was a certain similarity with the conservation of energy that Rinpoche had mentioned. Although these things had long been recorded by various seniors, no one had ever explained them like Rinpoche did. His school didn't lecture on the classics and history of Great Xia Academy, the art of war, or the way of governing a country. Instead, it was explaining the fundamentals of this world. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, the things that he talked about were shocking enough. Putting aside Rinpoche's character, he is indeed capable. What Su Qing said before was right, Qing Lian thought to herself as she continued to listen to what Rinpoche said. Rinpoche continued to talk about internal mechanics. Although she couldn't understand it, she still tried her best to memorize it. Rinpoche only saw her after the morning class was over. However, she wasn't as anxious as she was at the beginning. Instead, she wanted to listen as much as possible. When Rinpoche came out of the classroom, he saw a girl in a gauze dress standing in the courtyard. Not far away, Shi Qing was standing guard at the side as if he was looking at a criminal. He waved at the two of them, turned around and entered the office. In less than 2 minutes, Qing Lian was brought in. Qing Lian carefully sized up the person sitting in the room. This was the famous gigolo Qi Zixiao's lover, the poison warrior who killed tens of thousands of people in Great Xia and destroyed the entire 9 pavilions. There was also the principal who had just given a lecture that surprised her. Compared to the Aboriginals, he was still skinny, but compared to the Great Xia people, he was already very strong. His face was angular, and he wore a silver and blue robe with cloud patterns. He didn't look like the gigolo that she had imagined. She then swept her gaze to the corner of the room. Sure enough, the corpse that she saw yesterday was no longer there. Thinking about what she saw at the wine shop last night, Qing Lian felt that there was definitely something wrong. However, she was more interested in Rinpoche now. While Qing Lian was sizing him up, Rinpoche was also sizing her up. Her appearance wasn't important. The most important thing was her pair of eyes, which were attractive and unforgettable. "Take a seat. How should I address you?" Rinpoche asked after sizing her up. "Qing Lian." Qing Lian replied casually. "What kind of news are you going to send me?" Qing Lian retracted her gaze from the corner of the room, took out a letter from her bosom, and placed it on the table. The Crown Prince of Great Xia has ascended to the throne and is currently transferring troops to Tiesua Pass. Su Qing hopes that you can defeat this batch of Great Xia soldiers as soon as possible. Otherwise, if you drag on for too long, there will be many variables when the new troops finish their training. Rinpoche picked up the letter on the table, opened it, and read it carefully before saying, "Thank you for sending this letter. If you are not in a hurry, you can tour around Lan City for a few days." After finishing her sentence, Qing Lian calculated in her mind and said, "I unintentionally overheard Principal Ren's lecture just now. Please forgive me." "It's all right. Lectures are meant for people to listen to," Rinpoche replied indifferently. Qing Lian had an idea and said, "I have an abrupt request. I will be staying in Lan City for a few days. I wonder if I can listen to a lecture at Black Bamboo Academy? I am willing to exchange treasures for it." Before she came, she wanted to ask Rinpoche if he had any news about Ning Kaichen. However, her mind was currently focused on what Rinpoche was talking about. As for Ning Kaichen, it would be best if she could meet him, but it didn't matter if she didn't. Instead, what the person in front of her was talking about was more important. She knew that this request was too abrupt. Even an ordinary private school in Great Xia wouldn't allow anyone to listen to a lecture. Moreover, the things that the other party was talking about were obviously very important. They were far from what those private schools and academies were talking about. It was impossible for the other party to teach her so easily. More importantly, the other party wasn't an ordinary person or an ordinary official. Ordinary things might not be able to move him. However, no matter what, she wanted to give it a try. Oh! Rinpoche had a faint smile on his face. If the other party wanted to listen to his lecture for a few days, he didn't mind. In any case, the things that he was talking about were systematic. Even though a part of it was useful, it wouldn't be of much use. He didn't expect the other party to eagerly send him treasures. In that case, he had no reason to reject her. Chapter 633. Rinpoche had a spurious smile on his face. It was really surprising that someone would take the initiative to give him a gift. However, this spurious smile had a different meaning in Qing Lian's eyes. She thought that Rinpoche was concealing his identity and felt that she didn't have anything that could catch his eye. Originally, Qing Lian was only prepared to take out some precious herbs. Almost every sword master had some precious herbs that they obtained by chance but weren't suitable for themselves to exchange with others. Naturally, she had some. However, after thinking about Rinpoche's identity and the fact that Dayo controlled the 60,000 mountains, these herbs weren't that valuable. If she was rejected by him, it would be much more troublesome for her to ask again. Although she had only heard a few words from the outside, it made her feel that the sentence, "Energy will not disappear out of thin air, nor will it be produced out of thin air. It will only transform from one form to another, or transfer from one object to another. In the process of transformation and transfer, the total amount of energy remains the same." Hearing this sentence made this trip worthwhile. There were many cultivation techniques in this world, but only a few were useful to sword masters. However, this sentence of his pointed to the root of the problem and allowed her to understand a lot of things from this sentence. She was also very interested in the other things that Rinpoche was talking about. After thinking for a while, she gritted her teeth and said, "I have an ancient scroll. The origin of this technique is unreliable. I only know that it was passed down a long time ago. There are 3 scrolls in total. The first one is the method of cultivation, the second one is the method of nourishing the mind, and the third one is the method of martial arts. The first scroll is the foundation of cultivation, and the second scroll is the method of nourishing the mind to strengthen the spirit. Only when the spirit is strong enough can it be possible to open up the sky and earth and the earth." Open up the sky and earth and the earth and the earth? Rinpoche thought for a while and didn't seem to have heard of this term. "You don't know? How can you not know?" Unexpectedly, Qing Lian was extremely surprised to see Rinpoche's reaction. She was even more surprised than when she heard his lecture in the courtyard. How could someone who could point to the root of the problem not know about opening up the sky and earth and the earth and the earth? Rinpoche spread his hands. Why should he know? Qing Lian looked at him as if she was looking at a monster for a long time. She rolled her eyes a few times, and there were a few times when she wanted to say that she would use a shueka as her tuition fee. However, she had already mentioned the ancient scroll of methods. If she were to change her words now, she would be fooling a fool. He sighed in his heart. He didn't know if it was worth it to use the ancient scroll of 10,000 methods to listen to this lecture. Fortunately, although this thing was expensive, it was not very useful to him. Moreover, he had seen it many times, so it did not matter if he gave it away. Those who could use this thing were all martial artists, but the things that he wanted, ordinary martial artists would not be able to take them out. Therefore, it could only be used as a bargaining chip. Perhaps in the future, he could exchange it for something else, or perhaps he could hold it in his hand for the rest of his life. Since that was the case, he might as well make the exchange now. As long as the other party's words were of some value to him, then it would be worth it. Thinking of this, he felt much more at ease. A martial artist's cultivation is actually a process of perfecting themselves. The man-will level is only the foundation, while the earth-will level is to train the physical body. It is to train the body from top to bottom without any obstacles, and one can even use the physical body to sense the earth. On the other hand, the spirit-will level is the cultivation of the spirit, tempering the spirit, and reaching the stage where the spirit can sense the heaven and earth. However, at this moment, the spirit is the spirit, and the physical body is the physical body. The heaven in the heaven and earth refers to the spirit, and the earth refers to the physical body. Opening the heaven and earth refers to breaking through the membrane between the spirit and the physical body, condensing the spirit and the physical body into one, and finally reaching the stage where one can form the heaven and earth. Qing Lian explained. And the method of nourishing the spirit in the ancient scroll of 10,000 methods has the effect of condensing and strengthening the spirit. It is a pity that there is no first volume. If there is, one can practice it at the earth-will level. When one reaches the earth embryo realm, one can directly cross the path to heaven and attain the spirit-will level. But even so, this ancient scroll is much more valuable than most of the methods of nourishing the spirit. Qing Lian felt that it was a pity. If there was the first volume, the value of this ancient scroll would increase by 10 or even 100 times. Ren Baqian was deep in thought. It seemed that opening the heaven and earth was the realm above the spirit. This was something that he had never known. As for this ancient scroll, it could be used as a reference in the future. As for whether this ancient scroll could be used or not, it was still far from him. However, there were only 2 manuals related to the spirit in Qingxin Palace Hall, which showed how rare this type of martial arts was. Moreover, these 2 manuals were used to condense heaven-grade weapons. Not only could the other party condense heaven-grade weapons, but it also had the effect of strengthening the spirit. It was indeed valuable. The ancient scroll is in Great Xia. I will get someone to deliver it. It will arrive in about half a month, Qing Lian said. The ancient scroll doesn't matter. I see that you are wholeheartedly seeking knowledge, and your heart is commendable. You can come to class tomorrow. Ren Baqian nodded. Then, with a solemn face, he said, knowledge knows no boundaries. This was to prevent the other party from thinking that he allowed her to attend class because of the ancient scroll. After all, he was a teacher in a mountainous area. How could he be so unscrupulous? However, he felt that it was a little strange. A person who could take out such an ancient scroll was definitely not an ordinary person, let alone a messenger. This woman's identity was probably not ordinary. He didn't know why she came to Lan City and what her purpose was. Ren Baqian's words, knowledge knows no boundaries, surprised Qing Lian. To be able to say such words, his breadth of mind was far beyond that of an ordinary person. He was much stronger than those scholars that she had met before. It seems that I have misunderstood him in the past. This person isn't as unbearable as I thought, Qing Lian thought to herself. She had a much better impression of this legendary gigolo. Qing Lian cupped her fists at Ren Baqian and said, "Thank you, Principal Ren. I will take my leave first." After Qing Lian left, Ren Baqian sat for a while before returning to the palace. The empress was using a pair of scissors to cut candies from a tree. The candies that were hung up yesterday were already 1/5 gone. They were scattered all over the ground, but the empress didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Upon hearing Ren Baqian's footsteps, the empress turned her head and asked, "Where is the wine pool that you promised me?" "The officials have already discussed the street lamps. If I make another wine pool, I'm afraid that they will impeach me." Ren Baqian spread his hands. "Impeach? What impeach? Who would dare to impeach me?" The empress raised her eyebrows and sneered. "Tomorrow, I will ask around and brew some fruit wine for your majesty." Ren Baqian replied. "Okay." The empress's gloomy face immediately cleared up. Her eyebrows relaxed, and her eyes were full of admiration. Ren Baqian then told the empress about what happened just now, but she didn't seem to care at all. "I can't be bothered with these things. If there aren't any suitable martial arts manuals, I will bring you to rob them. From the Empress's point of view, problems that could be solved by force were never a problem. Your Majesty, as the monarch of a nation, you can't always rob. It will damage your reputation. Renbaqian said. You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. The Empress snorted. She was being kind, but the person in front of her actually didn't appreciate it. Her face immediately turned cold. It should be borrowing. How can you say that I'm robbing? Renbaqian changed the topic. He then mimicked the Empress's voice and said, I'm here to rob. Hand over all the gold, jewelry, and secret manuals. Hand over all the gold, jewelry, and secret manuals for me to take back and appreciate. Which one do you think is more suitable, Your Majesty? Renbaqian asked. The surrounding guards immediately looked at Renbaqian with admiration. Principal Ren was indeed Principal Ren. Let's not talk about which one is more suitable first. Your voice is very annoying. The Empress picked up Renbaqian with one hand and pretended to throw him. Your Majesty, these are all minor details. That's not the point. Renbaqian felt that something was wrong and quickly explained. What I pay attention to are the minor details. The Empress didn't listen to his explanation at all and directly threw him onto the candy tree like a sandbag. After a piece of candy fell, the Empress immediately beamed with joy. Chapter 634. That afternoon, Renbaqian finally received some good news. The rubber that Tong Jinye had asked someone to find had arrived. Hearing this news, he immediately led his men out of the palace and headed for the Ministry of Works. Upon arriving at the Ministry of Works, Renbaqian saw a few large rubber blocks that looked like aggregates packed in bags. There were white, light yellow, and brown colors. He touched it with his hand and found that it was quite elastic. However, he still had to bring it back to Earth and find someone to test if it could meet his requirements. Subsequently, Renbaqian left the Ministry of Works with a long list of materials that needed to be found, including sulfur, black kerosene, also known as petroleum, permanent magnets, aluminium nickel cobalt, samarium cobalt, neodymium iron boron, tungsten, tin, aluminum, and other mineral deposits. There were hundreds of them, and the characteristics of each type and the environment in which they were likely to appear were written behind them. It could be said that everything on this list was needed for the development of science and technology. As long as these things were found, most of the problems encountered in the development process could be solved. Just like sulfur, it could be used to make gunpowder, and it could also be used to make sulfuric acid. The function of gunpowder was needless to say, and sulfuric acid could be used to make explosives, pigments, fertilizers, batteries, and so on. It could be said that the future development of sulfuric acid was inevitable. There was no need to explain the role of oil either. Even a child on Earth knew the role of oil. Permanent magnets were needed to make generators. Tungsten could be used to make filament, high-speed steel, etc. Renbaqian only hoped to find as many species as possible so that there would be fewer constraints in the future. If they really lacked it, they could only bring it from Earth and wait for this world's chemistry to develop before slowly looking for a substitute. Renbaqian happily took out the list, but Tong Jinye was shocked when he saw it. So many? Try your best. In the future, no matter what special items you find, whether they are useful or not, bring them back for me to take a look. Who knows, there might be something I need. Remember to label the source of each item. In addition, the ones underlined on this piece of paper were the most important ones to look for. There was a high possibility that permanent magnets existed in Tianjin Basin. One could go there with a sword and see where the suction was the strongest. As for sulfur, it should be easy to find where there are volcanoes. Maybe we can find some other things as well. This isn't a good job. Tong Jinye smacked his lips. How much manpower and resources would it take to find so many things? Moreover, the introductions of many things seemed to be the same, so there was no way to find them. They are all essential things, so you must find them. If you lack money or manpower, you can report to Her Majesty, and she will agree, Rinpoche said. Tong Xinye glanced at Rinpoche and said, "Only Her Majesty supports you. Although some of the things you've created are quite useful, there are still too many of them. Do you remember the street lamps in the palace, the one that you have been complaining about? As long as we can find the tungsten and sulfur, as well as a large amount of copper and rubber, we can mass-produce them, just like the glass in the glass shop. When the time comes, the whole of Lan City will be covered and Lan City will become a city that never sleeps. If these things are manufactured and sold, would the Ministry of Works still be short of money?" Rinpoche bewitched. "As long as we find these things, Sir Tong will have made a great contribution to Dayo. Leave this to me. I will find it for you even if I have to risk my life." Upon hearing this, Tong Xinye immediately patted his chest as a guarantee. His fist, which was as big as a casserole, pounded on his chest like a drum. "Thank you, Sir Tong." Rinpoche cupped his hands with a smile and left with the bags of rubber. At night, Rinpoche and the Empress appeared in Rinpoche's bedroom. The Empress glanced around and saw a layer of dust on the floor as well as a few rows of footprints. The Empress believed that as long as she took a step out, there would definitely be an additional footprint. Or rather, there would already be 2 additional footprints where she was standing. The Empress was somewhat speechless. How could it be so dirty? More importantly, she came barefooted. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" "Hehe," Rinpoche exclaimed. "Be obedient and lie down." The Empress poked Rinpoche's waist, and half of his body immediately went numb. Then she placed him on the floor, forming a large human-shaped carpet. She then gently leaped and landed on Rinpoche's stomach. "Ow, ow." Rinpoche immediately cried out. The Empress rubbed her feet on Rinpoche's stomach twice before saying, "Why is it so dirty? The last time I came back, the cleaner resigned and went back to his hometown to recuperate. After all, every time I came here, I saw that bunch of idiots playing with barbells that weighed hundreds of kilograms, drinking, playing finger-guessing games, slapping people, and pasting people to the wall. It was too stressful to see such scenes every time. Previously, they wanted to resign several times, and I gave them a raise. In the end, the last time I came, I saw someone flying past me and pasting him to the wall while I was cleaning. I was so shocked that I fell off the ladder, broke one of my arms, and had to go home to recuperate." Rinpoche was speechless when he received this news. Unfortunately, he was about to leave and didn't have time to find a cleaner. He couldn't let the winged cavalry warriors clean the place. By the time they were done cleaning, his bedroom would be in ruins. Then this happened when he came back. "Weak humans," the Empress commented after thinking about it. "Your Majesty, you are also a human." Rinpoche reminded her. "I'm an aboriginal." The Empress didn't seem to mind at all. "Your Majesty, my stomach hurts." Rinpoche groaned. The Empress was obviously only about 50 kilograms, so why did she step on him so hard? "You are too weak. Go back and practice more martial arts." The Empress moved her feet, stepped on Rinpoche's chest, reached out, and opened the door. At this moment, Rinpoche suddenly reached out and scratched the sole of the Empress's foot. "Ah!" the Empress exclaimed as she felt the itch in her heart. She exerted force with her foot and landed outside the room in a flash. She turned around and glared at Rinpoche. "Ah!" Rinpoche spat out a mouthful of blood. The Empress's kick just now made him feel like his internal organs were about to explode. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid I can't make it." Rinpoche looked like he wanted to cry but had no tears. "My internal organs are all shattered." The Empress looked doubtful. Was her kick that powerful? However, Rinpoche was still spitting out mouthfuls of blood. "Zixiao, you didn't mean it, so I won't blame you. It's just that before I die, can you fulfill a wish of mine?" Rinpoche put on a gentle expression as blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. It was like a scene out of a kimchi drama. The Empress's heart skipped a beat. Scenes from the TV series that she had watched immediately flashed in her mind. She couldn't tell what kind of feeling she had, but it felt like something was being torn apart. Then, she carefully sensed Rinpoche's aura. The Empress stepped forward and kicked Rinpoche out of the window. "No." The Empress said angrily. This damned fellow lied to her again. Who asked you to pretend to be seriously injured? I'll seriously injure you. Your Majesty, this isn't right. Ren Baqian was outside the window, experiencing the thrill of free fall. Bang. Lady boss? What's wrong with you? Chapter 635. Your Majesty. Ren Baqian was on crutches, and his leg was in a cast. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He was really crippled this time. When he fell, his leg hit the barbell that those idiots used to exercise, and it cracked. It was a tragedy. It was such a huge piece of plowed land, so it was fine to fall anywhere. Even an ordinary person wouldn't die from the height of the second floor, let alone Ren Baqian, who was an intermediate man-wheel expert. But it was such a coincidence that his leg hit the barbell. He was taken away by an ambulance and sent to the hospital to be put in a cast. The Empress felt a little soft-hearted when she saw his miserable appearance, but her reputation was the most important thing in this world. She didn't show any signs of soft-heartedness. Serves you right. Your Majesty, don't you feel a little heartache? The Empress thought about it seriously. It's more heartache than stepping on an ant. Ren Baqian said, Your Majesty, please don't say any more. My heart is cold. The Empress rolled her eyes, placed a hand on his chest, and asked in a soft voice, Can you feel the heat of my palm? It was very warm, and it was right in front of his heart. He felt as if he could feel the Empress's heartbeat through the hand that was pressing on his chest. My clothes are too thick, so I can't feel it. Wait until I take them off. Ren Baqian began to pull up his t-shirt with one hand. The Empress raised her eyebrows, withdrew her hand, and kicked Ren Baqian's uninjured leg. Ren Baqian almost knelt down. Sure enough, teasing an Empress who was as strong as a transformer was risking his life. However, Ren Baqian was enjoying it. Ren Baqian originally wanted to go to the laboratory, but unfortunately, he was crippled. He could only ask Shen Feng to fetch some rubber from him and then send the plan back. As time went by, the results from the laboratory increased. At least for martial arts below the man-wheel level, the Messier 87 department used the supercomputer to test countless possibilities, and the final, 9th set of introductory cultivation could even reach the level of a top-notch martial art. However, after the man-wheel level, the progress was still slow due to the small number of samples. It was only a matter of time. Another important result was that the laboratory had made great progress in the field of brainwave reception through the study of the sword that could lengthen and shorten as well as bend and extend as needed. With the development of this technology, perhaps one day, humans would be able to complete all tasks by thinking. For example, smart homes, weapon control, and all objects with receivers could be controlled by thinking. As long as such thoughts were in one's mind, one would be able to complete tasks that originally required fingers or voice. Although this was still very far away, Ren Baqian was looking forward to the future. After staying on Earth for 2.5 days, Ren Baqian brought the tested rubber and the Empress back to Dayo. The first thing he did was to break up the plaster and apply a layer of ointment on his legs. After that, he walked to the academy on crutches. As soon as he entered the school, he saw a bored lady standing in the courtyard. She looked dissatisfied when she saw him. She was dissatisfied that he had promised her that she could attend the class, but she didn't. Then she looked at Ren Baqian's legs and pursed her lips. Her bright eyes were filled with schadenfreude as she asked, Did he encounter domestic violence? You even know about domestic violence? Ren Baqian was a little surprised. He didn't expect such a modern term to come out of her mouth. Humph, don't look down on me. I also went to a girls' school. Qing Lian's face immediately darkened. Great Xia actually has the term domestic violence. Ren Baqian immediately changed his way of saying it. If you know, why can't others know? Qing Lian asked. Ren Baqian spread his hands, walked toward the classroom with his walking stick, and said, Follow me. By the way, you have a dirty old man here. What does he do? He doesn't seem like an ordinary person. Qing Lian rolled her eyes and asked. The more she thought about how Li Fu suddenly appeared behind her that day, the more she felt that it was strange. How could she be bullied from behind without realizing it? Renbachyan laughed in his heart when he heard this. After tricking Li Fu into coming to Lan City for so long, he finally had a chance to show off. Casually, he said, "How did you meet him? He's sweeping the floor." Other than Renbachyan, which other school in the world had the world's #1 expert sweeping the floor? Just thinking about it made him feel that he was being too pretentious. If word got out, it would scare half the martial artists in the world to death. Sweeping the floor? Impossible? Qing Lian's reaction was the same as what Renbachyan had expected. There are a lot of things that are impossible. Renbachyan continued to act nonchalantly and acted as if he didn't care. Qing Lian was suspicious. Could it be that she was too focused that day and didn't notice that he was behind her? Was he actually not the exceptional expert that she thought he was? However, the speed and strength of his kick couldn't be faked. How could such a person be sweeping the floor here? As she thought about it, Qing Lian slowed down and fell behind Renbachyan. Renbachyan entered the classroom and coughed. The originally noisy classroom immediately quietened down. "From today onwards, there will be an auditing student who will be learning with you," Renbachyan said and then called out, "Come in." Someone from Great Xia? Qing Lian had just entered the classroom when there was an uproar. Tong Lan flipped over and landed on the table. It was as if she would pounce on them in the next second. "Be quiet and sit down, especially you. What do you look like now? A female monkey?" Renbachyan reprimanded. "He's someone from Great Xia." Tong Lan pointed at Qing Lian and shouted, "In the future, many of you will become officials. Don't treat the things that you will face with a black and white mindset. Only children will do that. Just like Great Xia, even though they are enemies now, they aren't a monolithic entity. There are enemies and some who aren't enemies. What we need to do is to turn our enemies into dead people and then turn those who aren't enemies into enemies instead of killing everyone indiscriminately." Renbachyan reasoned with the students calmly. Tong Lan, Shurgan, Qing Lian, everyone's faces were filled with shock and awe. Turning those who weren't enemies into enemies and then turning them into dead people? What was the difference between this and indiscriminately killing everyone with a rod? "Introduce yourself," Renbachyan said to Qing Lian with satisfaction when he saw that everyone had quietened down. Qing Lian really wanted to ask Renbachyan if what he said was right. However, she swallowed her words and said, "I'm Qing Lian. I'm not your enemy." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.